I need a wife by tomorrow. Or they take my daughter. The words shattered the silence of the frontier store like a gunshot. Every head turned. The mountain man standing in the doorway, broad-shouldered, weathered, desperate, looked like he'd rather face a grizzly than speak those words aloud. But desperation has a way of stripping a man down to his truth. What happened next would change 3 broken lives forever. A marriage born from panic, a child drowning in grief, and a woman running from ghosts she thought she'd buried. This is their story. If you're still watching at the end, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The late afternoon sun hung low over Timber Ridge, painting the mountain town in shades of amber and shadow. Clara Bennett stood behind the worn counter of Morrison's General Store, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she inventoried the week's shipment. Flour, salt, coffee. The rhythm of commerce had become her refuge. Predictable, controllable, safe. She was 28 years old and looked older. Not from age, but from the weight of things she carried silently. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, her gray dress chosen for practicality rather than beauty. She'd made herself invisible in this town, and that was exactly how she wanted it. The bell above the door chimed, a sound she'd heard 1,000 times. But this time, something was different. The man who entered wasn't a local. Clara knew every face in Timber Ridge, every regular customer, every passing traveler. This man was a stranger, and strangers made her cautious. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with shoulders that spoke of hard labor, and a face carved by mountain weather. His dark hair needed cutting, his jaw bore several days of stubble, and his clothes were those of someone who spent more time with trees than people. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, blue-gray, like storm clouds, and filled with something she recognized too well. Desperation. He didn't browse, didn't pretend to shop. He walked straight to the counter and stopped, his hands gripping the edge like he was steadying himself against rough seas. "I need to speak with Morrison," he said. His voice was rough, unused to conversation. "Mr. Morrison is in Denver for the month," Clara replied, her tone professional, distant. "I'm managing the store. If you need supplies—" "I don't need supplies." He cut her off, then seemed to catch himself. "I'm sorry. I need help. The kind money can buy." Clara's hand moved instinctively to the small derringer she kept beneath the counter. She'd learned to be careful. "I'm not sure what you mean." The man looked around the store. Old Mrs. Peterson was examining fabric near the window. The Hendricks boys were arguing over penny candy. Tom Chen was collecting nails for his carpentry work. All familiar faces, all listening without appearing to listen. "Is there somewhere private we can talk?" the man asked, lowering his voice. Clara should have said no, should have sent him away. But that look in his eyes, that desperate, drowning look, stopped her. She'd seen it before, in mirrors, on nights when the past crept too close. "The storeroom," she said quietly. Through that door. She came around the counter, aware of curious eyes following them. Let them wonder. They'd been wondering about her for 3 years now, since she'd arrived in Timber Ridge with nothing but a small trunk and a request for work. She'd never given them answers, and they'd eventually stopped asking. The storeroom was cramped, smelling of wood and spices. A single window provided dim light. Clara crossed her arms, maintaining distance. "You have 5 minutes," she said. The man removed his hat, turning it in his hands, a nervous gesture that seemed at odds with his rough exterior. "My name is Ethan Wilder. I have a cabin about 15 miles north, up in the high country. Been there 5 years now." Clara waited. She'd learned that silence made people reveal more than questions ever did. "3 days ago, I got a telegram," Ethan continued. His voice cracked slightly. "From a lawyer in St. Louis. There was a woman I knew, 6 years back, before I came to the mountains. Sarah Hartley. We were involved. Briefly. I left, had my reasons, and I never knew." He stopped, swallowed hard. "She died 2 weeks ago, fever. And she had a daughter, my daughter, Eliza Grace, 7 years old." Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "I'm sorry for your loss." "I never knew she existed," Ethan said, and there was raw pain in those words. "Sarah never told me." Maybe she tried to find me, maybe she didn't. I don't know. But the lawyer found me through an old employer, and now he looked up, meeting Clara's eyes. The child is coming here. Tomorrow. On the afternoon train. That's wonderful, Clara said carefully. You're being reunited with your daughter. No. The word came out harsh. You don't understand. The lawyer explained the law, territorial custody laws. An unmarried man cannot take custody of a female child over the age of 5, not without proving he can provide a proper home, with a mother figure, a wife. Clara began to understand. You're not married. I'm not married. I live alone in a cabin 15 miles from the nearest neighbor, and if I can't meet the legal requirements, his hands tightened on his hat, crumpling it. They'll take her. Put her in the St. Louis orphanage. My daughter, a child I never knew existed until 3 days ago, will disappear into that system, and I'll never see her again. The storeroom felt suddenly smaller. Clara's heart was beating faster, though her face remained calm. What does this have to do with me? Ethan Wilder looked at her directly. I need a wife. By tomorrow. Before that train arrives. The words hung in the dusty air between them. Clara laughed, a short, sharp sound without humor. You're insane. I'm desperate, he corrected. I've spent the last 3 days trying to figure this out. There's no time for courting, no time for normal ways. I rode to every settlement within 50 miles. Asked every woman I could find. They all said no, and I don't blame them. But if I don't find someone, if I can't prove I can provide a proper home. So you walk into a store and propose to a stranger? Clara's voice was cold now, defensive. You know nothing about me. I know you're capable, Ethan said. Morrison trusted you to run his store. I know you're respected, the way people talk about you in town. I know you're unmarried. He paused. And I know you're running from something. Clara's eyes flashed. Excuse me? I recognize it, Ethan said quietly. Because I'm running too. That's why I'm in those mountains. That's why I live alone. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking for anything real. Just a legal arrangement to save a child. You have some nerve. I have a deed to 300 acres of mountain land, Ethan interrupted. Timber rights, mineral rights. It's worth money, real money. It's yours if you do this. The land, the cabin, everything. I'll sign it over. Clara stared at him. You'd give me everything you own. For my daughter? Yes. His voice broke on that last word. She's 7 years old and she just lost her mother, the only parent she's ever known. She's being shipped across the country to a father she's never met. And if I can't take her, she goes to an orphanage where... He couldn't finish the sentence. They both knew what happened to children in orphanages. The overcrowding, the illness, the abuse, the slow death of hope. Clara turned away, staring at the dusty window. Her reflection stared back. A woman who'd built walls so high that nothing could touch her anymore. I can't, she whispered. Why not? Because... Clara closed her eyes. Because I failed a child once before. Because I don't deserve to try again. Because I came here to hide from exactly this kind of responsibility. Because it's not that simple. It could be, Ethan said. A simple legal marriage. You help me keep Eliza. In return, you get security, land, a home. After a year, if you want, we can dissolve it. You'd still keep the property. I'd find another way. There is no other way, Clara said flatly. If this doesn't work, they take her. Yes. She turned back to face him. This close, she could see the desperation more clearly, the sleepless shadows under his eyes, the tightness around his mouth, the way his hands trembled slightly as they gripped his hat. You don't even know me, Clara said again, but her voice was softer now. I could be anyone. I could be dangerous. Are you? She thought about her past, about the decision she'd made, about the weight of a small body in her arms, cold and still. In some ways. So am I, Ethan replied. That's why I left civilization for the mountains. But right now, I'm just a father who's trying to keep his daughter, and I'm begging for help. Clara felt something crack inside her chest, She'd spent 3 years building a life of carefully controlled distance. No attachments, no vulnerabilities, no children, especially no children. "I need to think," she said. "The train arrives at 2 o'clock tomorrow
This story
afternoon,"
was posted
Ethan
on the
said.
channel west
"I need
of
an answer by
Betrayal.
dawn.
Please do
The
not
territorial
repost
judge
it
can
in any
perform the
form.
ceremony at sunrise if we're there when his office opens. That gives us just enough time to—" "I said I need to think." Claire's voice rose, surprising them both. Ethan stepped back, nodding. "I'm staying at the boarding house, Mrs. Patterson's place. If you decide—" He placed a piece of paper on a crate, a hastily drawn map. "This is how to find my cabin, in case you need to see it, to see what the situation is." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I know this is impossible to ask. I know I have no right. But that little girl, Eliza, she didn't ask for any of this. She didn't ask to lose her mother. She didn't ask to have a father who abandoned her before she was born. She's innocent in all of this, and she deserves better than an orphanage." With that, he left. Clara stood alone in the storeroom, staring at the map he'd left behind. Her hands were shaking, a physical response she couldn't control. Through the door, she heard the normal sounds of the store. Mrs. Peterson asking about the fabric price. The Hendricks boys making their selection. Life continuing as it always did, predictable and safe. But in this dim room, with dust motes dancing in the failing light, Clara felt the past rising up like a flood she couldn't dam. A different room, a different time. A child's hand in hers, so small and trusting. "Will you stay with me?" And Clara's promise. Always. A promise she'd broken in the worst possible way. She pressed her hands against the crate, steadying herself. This was different, she told herself. This wasn't the same situation. This was a legal arrangement, nothing more. A business transaction to help a child avoid the orphanage system. But the lies we tell ourselves are always the most dangerous ones. Chapter 2. The Weight of Choice. Clara didn't sleep that night. She'd closed the store at the usual time, walked to her small rented room above the bakery, prepared her simple dinner. All the normal rituals. But as darkness fell over Timber Ridge, she found herself standing at her window, staring out at the mountains silhouetted against the stars. 15 miles north. That's where Ethan Wilder's cabin stood, where a room awaited a 7-year-old girl who'd just lost everything. Clara's fingers traced the edge of the map he'd left. She'd told herself she wouldn't look at it, wouldn't consider his impossible proposal. But here she was at midnight, the paper spread across her small table, studying the carefully marked trail. On the dresser sat her only photograph, a small daguerreotype in a tarnished frame. She never looked at it anymore. Couldn't bear to. But tonight, she picked it up with trembling hands. A young woman stared back, younger than Clara was now, with hope still bright in her eyes. And beside her, a child. A boy, 4 years old, with a gap-toothed smile and his hand trustingly in hers. Thomas. His name was a wound that had never healed. She'd been 22, working as a governess for a wealthy family in Chicago. Thomas was their youngest son, bright, curious, exhausting, and wonderful. For 2 years, she'd cared for him, read him stories, taught him letters, held him when nightmares came. And then one winter night, everything had shattered. The family had hosted a party, a grand affair with dozens of guests. Clara was meant to watch Thomas, keep him safe upstairs while the adults celebrated below. But she'd been young and foolish, charmed by a visitor's son who'd smiled at her in the hallway. They'd talked for just 20 minutes, maybe 30. When she returned to the nursery, Thomas was gone. They found him in the morning. He'd wandered outside in his nightshirt, following the sound of music and laughter. In the Chicago winter, a 4-year-old doesn't last long. The family never blamed her directly. They were too refined for that. But she'd seen it in their eyes, the mother who couldn't look at her, the father's quiet dismissal, the servants' whispers. Claire had blamed herself enough for all of them. She'd left Chicago that week, changed her name slightly, Clara Marie Bennett instead of Claire Marion Benning. Traveled west until she found a town small enough that her past couldn't follow. Built a life of careful isolation where she could never fail anyone again. And now Ethan Wilder wanted her to be responsible for another child. The irony was crushing. She set the photograph down, her hands shaking. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to maintain the safe distance she'd constructed. She wasn't qualified to help a grieving 7-year-old. She wasn't qualified to be anyone's mother, even temporarily. She'd already proven that. But as she stared at the map again, another thought crept in, quiet and insistent. What if this is your chance to do it right? Clara shook her head, trying to dismiss it. This wasn't about redemption. She didn't deserve redemption. Thomas was dead, and that would never change. But Eliza Grace Wilder was alive. Coming on a train tomorrow afternoon. A child who'd lost her mother and was about to lose her only chance at a father, too. The territorial custody laws were harsh but simple. Unmarried men couldn't raise daughters alone. It wasn't about Ethan's character or capability. It was about propriety, about social standards that crushed individual circumstances beneath bureaucratic weight. If Clara did nothing, Eliza would go to an orphanage. Clara had visited an orphanage once in Chicago, delivering Christmas charity with her employer's family. She still remembered the children's eyes, hollow and hopeless, the light already dying in them, the overcrowding, the illness, the systematic breaking of spirits too young to defend themselves. She stood abruptly, unable to sit still any longer. Her small room felt suffocating. Before she consciously decided to move, she was pulling on her coat, tucking the map into her pocket. The bakery below was dark and quiet. She slipped out the back door into the cold mountain night. The streets of Timber Ridge were deserted. Only the saloon showed light, the sound of piano music and rough laughter drifting through the darkness. Clara avoided it, heading for the livery stable instead. Old Jacob slept in a room at the back. She knocked quietly, and after a moment he appeared, lantern in hand, squinting at her. "Miss Bennett, what's wrong?" "I need to borrow a horse," Clara said. "I'll have it back by dawn." Jacob studied her, this reserved woman who never made unusual requests, never deviated from routine. This about that mountain man who was asking around town. Of course, word had spread. In a town this size, everything spread. "It's personal business," Clara said firmly. Jacob nodded slowly. "You know how to ride?" "Well enough." He saddled a gentle mare, gave Clara basic instructions, and watched with concern as she rode out into the darkness. She heard him muttering about city women and fool ideas, but she was already focused on the trail ahead. The map was clear enough even in moonlight. North through the valley, following the river until the fork, then taking the eastern path up into the high country. Clara had never ridden much. Governess work hadn't required it. But the mare was steady and patient with her inexperience. As she climbed higher, the night grew colder. The sound of the river faded, replaced by wind in the pines and the occasional call of a night bird. Stars blazed overhead with an intensity she'd never seen in Chicago, undimmed by city lights. She'd been riding for over 2 hours when she saw the cabin. It sat in a small clearing, backed against the mountain slope. Even in darkness, she could see it was solidly built, hand-hewn logs, a stone chimney, a covered porch. A small barn stood nearby. Everything was neat, well-maintained, speaking of someone who took pride in their work. Light showed through one window. He was awake. Clara dismounted, her legs unsteady after the long ride. She tied the mare to the porch rail and stood for a moment, gathering her courage. Before she could knock, the door opened. Ethan Wilder stood in the doorway, a rifle in his hands, pointed down, not threatening, but ready. When he saw her, surprise flashed across his face. "Miss Bennett?" "I wanted to see it," Clara said. "The cabin, the situation." Ethan lowered the rifle, setting it aside. "You rode up here alone? At night?" I needed to know what I was considering. She lifted her chin, defiant. "May I come in?" He stepped back, gesturing her inside. The cabin's interior surprised her. She'd expected rough bachelor quarters, disorder, and neglect. Instead, she found careful organization. A main room with a stone fireplace, handmade furniture, shelves lined with books. A kitchen area with actual dishes, not just tin plates. Everything clean, everything purposeful. "Through here," Ethan said quietly, moving to a door on the far wall. He pushed it open and Clara stepped into a smaller room. A child's room, clearly just finished. Her breath caught. A small bed with carved posts, covered in a quilt that must have taken weeks to make. A dresser with a mirror above it. A trunk for clothes. And everywhere, carved wooden animals, bears, deer, birds, rabbits, each one carefully detailed, lovingly made. On the wall, someone had painted a mountain scene with wildflowers. "I've been working on it for 3 days," Ethan said from behind her. Since I got the telegram. I don't know if it's right. I don't know what 7-year-old girls like, but I thought
This story was
his voice
posted on the
roughened.
channel
I
west
thought
of
she should
Betrayal.
have something that
Please
was
do not
hers.
repost
Something
it
that
in any
showed I was
form.
trying. Clara picked up one of the carved animals, a small rabbit with alert ears and bright painted eyes. The detail was extraordinary. This wasn't the work of someone going through motions. This was the work of someone pouring everything they had into preparation for a child they desperately wanted to save. You made all of these? She asked. I'm better with my hands than with words, Ethan said. Always have been. When I don't know what to say, I build things, make things. It's how I think. Clara set the rabbit down carefully. Tell me about her. About Eliza. Ethan moved to the dresser, pulling a paper from his pocket. The telegram, worn from repeated reading. This is all I know. Eliza Grace Wilder, born March 15th, 7 years ago. Mother, Sarah Hartley, deceased. Father, Ethan Wilder. Child currently in temporary care pending custody resolution. That's it. That's everything. The lawyer sent nothing else? A photograph. Ethan pulled out a small image, handing it to Clara with hands that trembled slightly. In the dim light, Clara studied the picture. A small girl with dark hair and serious eyes stared at the camera. She wasn't smiling. Children rarely smiled in photographs. But there was something in her expression that struck Clara. A guardedness. A wariness too old for 7 years. A child who'd already learned that the world wasn't safe. She looks like you, Clara said softly. The eyes. I don't see it, Ethan admitted. I just see a stranger. A child I should have known, should have been there for, and wasn't. And now I'm supposed to be her father, supposed to know what to do, and I... He stopped, jaw tight. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to talk to children. I live alone because I'm better alone. But she's my daughter, and I won't let them take her. The raw honesty in his voice cut through Clara's defenses. Why did you leave? She asked. Before she was born. Why did you leave Sarah? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Because I was a coward, he finally said. Sarah wanted things I couldn't give her. Stability, society, a normal life. I was wild back then, couldn't settle. We fought constantly, so I left. Took a job heading west, told myself it was better for both of us. He laughed bitterly. I never knew she was pregnant. Maybe she tried to tell me and I'd already gone. Maybe she decided I wasn't worth finding. Either way, I wasn't there. And now Sarah's dead, and all I can do is try to be here for Eliza, if they'll let me. Clara walked to the window, looking out at the mountain darkness. If I agree to this, she said slowly, we need to establish some rules. She heard Ethan's sharp intake of breath behind her. No lies to the child, Clara continued. She's already lost her mother. She deserves the truth, even if it's complicated. We explain the situation honestly, in a way she can understand. Agreed, Ethan said immediately. No emotional distance, Clara went on. If we do this, we commit fully. Not as strangers performing roles, but as... She searched for the right words. As adults trying genuinely to help her heal. She needs stability, not pretense. Yes. And you have to promise me something. Clara turned to face him. If I fail, if I can't do this, if I prove inadequate, you don't protect me. You do what's best for Eliza, even if that means finding someone else. Ethan stepped closer, his storm gray eyes intent. Why would you fail? Clara's fingers tightened on the window frame. Because I already have. She told him then, about Thomas, about the night she'd failed to keep a child safe, about the 3 years she'd spent hiding from any situation that might require her to care for someone again. Ethan listened without interruption. When she finished, silence filled the small room. You were 22, he finally said. You made a mistake. A terrible mistake, but a mistake. You didn't abandon a child on purpose. You didn't run from responsibility. You ran from grief. I let him die. You made an error in judgment. That's different from not caring. Ethan's voice was gentle, but firm. The fact that you're still carrying this 3 years later tells me you care too much, not too little. And maybe, he hesitated, maybe that's exactly what Eliza needs. Someone who understands loss. Someone who knows what it's like to fail and to carry guilt. Someone who won't make empty promises, but will show up anyway. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes, the first tears she'd allowed herself in years. "I don't deserve a second chance," she whispered. "Neither do I," Ethan replied. "But maybe Eliza deserves parents who know they're not perfect, who won't pretend to have all the answers but will fight like hell to keep her safe." Clara looked around the room again, at the bed built by hand, at the carved animals, at the painted flowers, evidence of a man desperately trying to become someone worthy of his daughter. And she thought of Eliza arriving on a train tomorrow afternoon, 7 years old, motherless, about to meet a father she'd never known existed. What if this is your chance to do it right? The thought returned, insistent. Not redemption. She still didn't deserve that. But purpose. A reason to face the thing she'd been running from. "I have one more condition," Clara said, her voice stronger now. "You asked what her name was when you first told me. Do you remember?" Ethan nodded. "I told you, Eliza Grace." "No. When you asked me to marry you, you said, 'my daughter.' You were asking a stranger to help you keep custody, and you didn't even say her name. From now on, if I agree to this, we use her name, always. She's not the child or my daughter. She's Eliza. She's a person, not a problem to be solved." Something shifted in Ethan's expression. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. "Eliza," he repeated, and Clara heard how he held the name carefully, like something precious he was just learning to carry. "One more thing," Clara said. She met his eyes directly. "Why me? You said you asked every woman within 50 miles, but why did you come to me?" Ethan considered the question. "Because when I asked around town about unmarried women, everyone told me about you. They said you were capable, educated, respected. But they also said you kept to yourself, that you'd come from back east running from something, and you'd made it clear you wanted to be left alone." He paused. "I thought maybe someone who understood needing to hide might also understand needing to save something, even if it scared you." Clara absorbed this. He'd chosen her not despite her brokenness, but because of it. "I need to be back in town before dawn," she said, "to open the store." "Is that a yes?" Clara looked one more time at the photograph of Eliza, at those serious eyes that had already seen too much loss. "If we're doing this," she said, "we do it right. We meet with the judge at sunrise, we marry legally, and then we have," she calculated quickly, "about 7 hours to turn this cabin into a home that won't terrify a grieving 7-year-old. Ethan's face transformed. Not quite a smile, the situation was too heavy for that, but relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. "Thank you," he said, and the words carried the weight of everything they meant. Clara held up a hand. "Don't thank me yet. We don't know if this will work. We don't know if I can—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "We'll figure it out," Ethan said, "together." It was perhaps the most frightening word Clara had ever heard. Together meant responsibility. Together meant vulnerability. Together meant risking failure again. But as she rode back down the mountain trail in the pre-dawn darkness, with Ethan's cabin disappearing behind her and the town of Timber Ridge waiting below, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Not hope. That was too strong. But maybe the faint possibility that running wasn't the only option anymore. That sometimes the bravest thing you could do was stand still and face the thing that terrified you most. And for Clara Bennett, that thing was the chance to help save a child, even if it meant risking her heart to do it. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten when Clara returned the mare to the stable. Jacob was already up, forking hay, and he gave her a long look but asked no questions. Small mercies. She had 3 hours to prepare. 3 hours to close one chapter of her carefully controlled life and step into something terrifying and unknown. In 7 hours, she would be married. In 9 hours, she would meet Eliza. And everything, absolutely everything, would change. The territorial courthouse opened at precisely 6 in the morning, and Clara was waiting on the steps when Judge Harrison arrived with his coffee and newspaper. The old man paused mid-stride, his weathered face registering surprise. "Miss Bennett, is something wrong?" "I need to get married, Your Honor," Clara said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "This morning, as soon as possible." Judge Harrison's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline, In the 3 years Clara had lived in Timber Ridge, she'd never given anyone reason for gossip. Now, here she was, requesting an immediate marriage before the sun had fully cleared the mountains. "I see,"
This story was
he said
posted on the
carefully.
channel west of
And the
Betrayal.
fortunate gentleman?
Please do not repost it in
Footsteps
any
sounded
form.
behind them. Clara turned to see Ethan Wilder approaching, freshly shaved and wearing what was clearly his only good suit, slightly too tight across the shoulders, but clean and pressed. He'd made an effort. "Mr. Wilder," Judge Harrison said, recognition dawning. "The mountain man with the custody situation. I heard about your predicament." He looked between them. "This is quite sudden." "We understand the unusual circumstances, Your Honor," Ethan said, "but the train arrives at 2 o'clock. The child, my daughter Eliza, she needs a stable home. We're prepared to marry legally and properly." Judge Harrison studied them both with eyes that had seen decades of human nature in his courtroom. A marriage of convenience to satisfy custody requirements. "I'm not opposed to it. The law is the law, after all. But I need to ask you both a question, and I need honest answers." Clara felt her stomach tighten. "Of course, Your Honor." "This child has already lost her mother. She's being placed with a father she's never met. Adding a stepmother who's essentially a stranger, that's a lot for a 7-year-old to handle." His gaze was penetrating. "Are you both prepared to actually commit to this? Or are you just playing parts to satisfy territorial bureaucrats?" Ethan spoke first. "I won't lie to you, Judge. I don't know how to be a father. I've never even held a child. But Eliza is my daughter, and I won't let her go to an orphanage. If that means learning as I go, making mistakes, being terrified every single day, that's what I'll do." Judge Harrison turned to Clara. "And you, Miss Bennett? You strike me as a woman who values her independence. Why take this on?" Clara thought of Thomas, of 3 years spent hiding, of the photograph of a serious-eyed 7-year-old who deserved better than bureaucratic indifference. "Because someone should fight for her," Clara said quietly. "Even if we're not qualified, even if we're scared, someone should try." The judge was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Come inside. Let's make this legal." The ceremony was brief and businesslike. Judge Harrison's clerk served as witness, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Kowalski, who kept shooting curious glances at Clara throughout the proceedings. The words were standard legal language, stripped of romance or sentiment. "Do you, Ethan James Wilder, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Clara Marie Bennett, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara's mouth was dry. This was the moment, the point of no return. After this, she would be bound to this man, responsible for his daughter, committed to a path she couldn't predict or control. She thought of the cabin in the mountains, of the carved wooden animals, of Ethan's raw honesty about his failures and fears. "I do." Judge Harrison pronounced them married, and just like that, Clara's carefully constructed life of solitude shattered. She was now Mrs. Clara Wilder, wife of a mountain recluse, about to become stepmother to a child she'd never met. Ethan signed the marriage certificate with a hand that trembled slightly. Clara's signature was steady. She'd learned long ago to hide her fear behind competence. "The certificate will be filed today," Judge Harrison said. "As far as territorial law is concerned, you're now a married couple capable of providing a proper home for a female child. When the custody officials arrive with Eliza, show them that." He handed Ethan an official copy. "They can't take her from a legitimate 2-parent household." "Thank you, Your Honor," Ethan said. As they stepped out into the morning sunlight, Clara felt the weight of what they'd just done settle over her like a physical thing. She was married. After years of refusing even to consider courtship, she'd married a stranger to save a child. "We need supplies," she said, her mind already working through logistics. "Food that will appeal to a 7-year-old, dishes, linens, things to make the cabin feel less masculine." Ethan nodded. "I have money. Whatever you need." They walked to Morrison's General Store, Clara's workplace, now feeling strange and surreal. She unlocked the door, acutely aware of Ethan following her inside. "I need to leave a note for Mr. Morrison," Clara said. "He's due back next week, and he'll need to find a new clerk." "You're quitting?" Clara looked at him in surprise. "I can't exactly manage a store in town while living 15 miles up a mountain, and Eliza will need consistency. especially at first. Someone present. Something flickered across Ethan's face. Relief, perhaps, or gratitude. I hadn't thought that far ahead. That's because you've been focused on the immediate crisis, Clara said. She moved through the store, gathering items. Now we need to think about the reality. A 7-year-old girl is coming to live in a remote cabin with 2 strangers. We need to make it as comfortable as possible. She selected flour, sugar, dried fruit, vanilla extract, fresh eggs from the cold storage, milk and butter that would need to be transported quickly, fabric for curtains, an oil lamp with a painted glass shade, a child-sized hairbrush, ribbons. Ethan watched her work with something like awe. You're thinking of everything. I was a governess, Clara said quietly. Before. I know what children need, or at least I used to. The old pain flickered. We'll also need books, simple ones at first until we know her reading level. She pulled several volumes from the shelf, a collection of fairy tales, a book about animals, a primer with illustrations. As Clara worked, other early risers began appearing on the street outside. Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house, Tom Chen heading to his carpentry shop, and then, inevitably, old Mrs. Peterson, the town's most dedicated gossip. Mrs. Peterson's eyes widened as she peered through the window and saw Clara and Ethan together, surrounded by domestic supplies. By noon, the whole town would know. By evening, the speculation would be rampant. Clara found she didn't care. She'd spent 3 years carefully managing her reputation, maintaining proper distance. Now, none of that mattered. Only Eliza mattered. We should go, she said. We have a lot to do before 2 o'clock. They loaded the supplies into Ethan's wagon, a sturdy vehicle clearly built for mountain transport. Clara climbed up beside him, and they headed north out of town. Behind them, Clara could feel curious eyes watching. Let them watch. She was done hiding. The ride up to the cabin took nearly 2 hours. The trail was rough, winding through dense pine forest and across rocky streams. Clara held on as the wagon jolted over roots and stones, watching the civilization of Timber Ridge disappear behind them. It's isolated, Ethan said, clearly feeling the need to acknowledge it. The nearest neighbor is 8 miles east. In winter, we can get snowed in for weeks. Is there enough supplies to handle that? I stock up every fall. Food, firewood, medicine. I'm used to being self-sufficient. He paused. But now there's 3 of us. I'll need to adjust my thinking. 3 of us. The words hung in the air between them, this new fragile unit they were trying to form. When they reached the cabin, Clara climbed down and surveyed it with fresh eyes. In daylight, she could see more clearly what Ethan had built. The structure was solid and well-maintained, with a neat vegetable garden to one side and a chicken coop behind. The barn housed a cow and 2 horses. This wasn't some thrown-together hermit's shack. It was a homestead, carefully tended. You've done well here, Clara said. Ethan shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. It keeps me busy. They unloaded the supplies together, and Clara began the work of transformation. She started in Eliza's room, hanging curtains patterned with small flowers. The fabric softened the rough log walls immediately. She placed the new lamp on the dresser, arranged the books on a small shelf Ethan had built, and laid out the hairbrush and ribbons. She might not use them, Clara said, more to herself than to Ethan. She might hate ribbons, but she should have the option. In the main room, she worked with determined efficiency. Fresh curtains here, too, a tablecloth for the rough-hewn table. She rearranged Ethan's sparse decorations, adding touches of warmth, a vase for wildflowers, even though there were none blooming yet, cushions for the wooden chairs. Ethan watched her work, occasionally helping when she needed something moved or lifted. But mostly he stayed out of her way, seeming to understand that she needed to do this, needed to create something that felt like home rather than just shelter. I should start cooking, Clara said finally, surveying the kitchen area. She'll be hungry after the journey. And children do better when there's food. It's comforting. What should we make? Clara paused. She realized she had no idea what Eliza liked to eat. No idea if the child had allergies or preferences. They were stepping into this completely blind. Something simple, she decided. Bread. Children usually like fresh bread. And soup. Nothing too spicy or strange. We need to be gentle. not overwhelming. As she mixed dough, kneading it with practiced hands, Ethan sat at the table cleaning his rifle. A habitual task, she gathered.
This story
something
was
he did to
posted on the
occupy his
channel
hands when
West of
thinking.
Betrayal.
"Are you
Please do not
scared?"
repost
he asked
it in any
suddenly.
form.
Claire's hand stilled in the dough. "Terrified," she admitted. "Me too." He set down the cleaning rod. "I keep trying to imagine what I'll say when I see her. How do you introduce yourself to your own daughter?" "Honestly," Claire said, "that's what we agreed. No pretending we have this figured out. What if she hates me? What if she takes one look and refuses to come?" "Then we deal with it," Clara said firmly, "but running through every terrible possibility won't help. We can only control what we do, not how she responds." Ethan nodded slowly. "You sound very certain for someone who claims to be terrified." "I'm good at hiding it," Clara said. 3 years of practice." She shaped the dough into loaves and set them to rise. Then she started on the soup, chicken broth with vegetables, simple and nourishing. As she worked, she found herself falling into old rhythms. The governess work had taught her to create comfort through small domestic rituals. A well-set table, fresh bread, clean linens. Children responded to these things, even when words failed. The morning passed in focused activity. Ethan chopped wood for the stove, ensuring they had plenty for cooking and warmth. Clara scrubbed floors that were already clean, needing something to do with her nervous energy. They moved around each other with careful politeness, two strangers learning to share space. By noon, the cabin had transformed. It still bore Ethan's mark, the sturdy furniture, the hunting trophies, the masculine practicality. But now it also held softness, light through flowered curtains, the smell of baking bread, small touches that whispered home rather than just shelter. "We should eat something," Clara said, "before we go to the station." They sat at the table, the first meal they'd shared as a married couple. Bread and cheese, some of the soup Clara had made. They ate in silence, both too nervous for conversation. Finally, Ethan spoke. "I never asked what you want me to call you. Mrs. Wilder seems too formal, but Clara feels presumptuous," Clara offered with a slight smile. "We are married. Clara is fine." "Clara, then." He said her name carefully, testing it. "And you should call me Ethan." It was such a small thing, the exchange of first names, but it felt significant, like they were acknowledging this strange bond they'd formed. "We should talk about how we'll handle questions," Clara said. "Eliza will want to know about us, about our marriage." "We tell her the truth," Ethan said, "that we married so I could keep her, that it's an arrangement." Clara shook her head. "We tell her a version of the truth. We don't burden her with legal complexities or the word arrangement. We say we married quickly because we wanted to be ready when she arrived. We say we're both here for her. The rest, the complications, she doesn't need to carry that." "You don't think we should be completely honest?" "I think there's a difference between honesty and dumping adult problems on a grieving child," Clara said. "She needs to feel secure, not like she's the reason two strangers force themselves into an uncomfortable situation." Ethan considered this. "You're right. I wasn't thinking about how it would sound from her perspective. Children hear everything through the filter of, 'Is this my fault?'" Clara said quietly, remembering Thomas. "Especially children who've lost a parent. They look for ways to blame themselves. We need to be careful with our words." The clock on the mantel ticked toward 1. They needed to leave soon to reach the train station by 2. Clara changed her dress, choosing her best one, simple gray wool, but well made and clean. She pinned her hair more carefully than usual, aware that Eliza would be forming first impressions, not too severe, approachable, if possible. When she emerged from the small bedroom, Ethan had also changed back into his good suit. He looked uncomfortable in it, tugging at the collar. "Ready?" he asked. Clara almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. How could anyone be ready for this? "No," she said honestly, "but we're going anyway." They took the wagon back down the mountain trail, the journey feeling much faster this time. Clara's heart was beating too quickly, her mouth dry despite the water she'd drunk. Beside her, Ethan gripped the reins with white-knuckled tension. As they descended toward Timber Ridge, Clara found herself rehearsing words. What do you say to a child you've never met, who's just lost everything? How do you convey safety when you're barely holding yourself together? The town appeared below them, and Clara could see the train station at the far end of the main street. A thin line of smoke on the horizon indicated the approaching train. They were almost out of time. Ethan pulled the wagon to a stop near the station. The platform was mostly empty, a few travelers waiting, the station master checking his pocket watch. No one paid them much attention. "What if they don't let her go with us?" Ethan said suddenly. "What if there's some other requirement we missed?" "We have the marriage certificate," Clara reminded him. "We meet the legal requirements. They have no grounds to refuse." But even as she said it, Clara felt her own doubt creeping in. Bureaucracy had a way of creating unexpected obstacles, and they were asking for something significant, immediate custody of a child who just crossed half the country. The train whistle sounded in the distance, and Clara felt her stomach clench. "She's coming," Ethan breathed. They stood together on the platform, this hastily married couple, waiting for the arrival that would change everything. Clara found her hand moving instinctively to smooth her skirt, to check her hair, nervous gestures she couldn't control. The train appeared around the bend, massive and unstoppable. Steam billowed, brakes squealed, and then it was there, hissing and settling beside the platform. Doors opened. Passengers began to disembark. A merchant with his goods, an older couple, a man in a business suit, and then, escorted by a stern-looking woman in a severe black dress, a small figure appeared in the doorway of one of the passenger cars. Clara's breath stopped. Eliza Grace Wilder was tiny for 7 years old, delicate-boned and pale, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her look like a miniature adult. She wore a black morning dress that was clean but had clearly been made for someone else, hanging slightly too large on her thin frame. In her arms, she clutched a small carpet bag, everything she owned in the world, most likely. But it was her eyes that broke Clara's heart. Those serious, guarded eyes from the photograph were even more devastating in person. They held an emptiness that no 7-year-old should possess, the look of someone who'd learned too young that the world was neither safe nor kind. She descended the steps carefully, the woman's hand on her shoulder. When her feet touched the platform, she didn't look around with curiosity like a normal child might. She simply stood, waiting, her expression blank. The woman, clearly the representative from the custody office, approached them. "Mr. Wilder?" "Yes, ma'am?" Ethan's voice was rough. He couldn't take his eyes off Eliza. "I'm Mrs. Thornton, from the St. Louis Office of Child Welfare. I have custody of Eliza Grace Wilder pending verification of your situation." Her tone was clipped, professional. "I'll need to see proof of marriage and suitable accommodations." Ethan handed over the certificate with shaking hands. Mrs. Thornton examined it closely, then looked at Clara. "You're the wife?" "Yes, ma'am, Clara Wilder." The name felt strange on her tongue. "How long have you been married?" "We married this morning, ma'am," Clara said honestly, "as soon as we learned of the custody requirements." Mrs. Thornton's expression tightened. "A marriage of convenience, then." "A marriage of commitment," Clara corrected gently. "We're committed to providing Eliza with a stable, caring home." Mrs. Thornton studied them both with the jaded eyes of someone who'd seen too many bad situations. "I'll need to inspect your home before releasing custody." "Of course," Ethan said. "It's about an hour's ride north. You're welcome to see everything." "I intend to." Mrs. Thornton turned, beckoning to Eliza. "Come here, child." Eliza moved forward mechanically, her small face showing no emotion. She stood before them, this tiny girl who carried herself like someone expecting rejection. Ethan knelt down slowly, bringing himself to her eye level. His hands were shaking visibly. "Hello, Eliza, he said, and his voice cracked on her name. I'm your father." The words hung in the air. Eliza looked at him with those devastating eyes, and Clara saw no recognition there, no joy, just wariness. "My mother told me about you," Eliza said finally. Her voice was so quiet Clara had to strain to hear it. "She said you left." The accusation was simple and devastating. Ethan flinched as if struck. "I did," he said. "I left before you were born, and I didn't know about you. But if I had known, Eliza, if I had known you existed," his voice broke completely. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry you lost your mother. I'm sorry for everything you've had to face alone." Eliza's expression didn't change. Mrs. Thornton says I have to live with you now. Not have to, Ethan said desperately. I want you to. I know I'm a stranger to you. I know I have no right to call
This
myself
story
your
was
father
posted
when I
on the
wasn't
channel
there.
west of
But I'm
Betrayal.
here now. And I'm
Please do not
leaving.
repost
Not
it in
ever.
any form.
For the first time, something flickered in Eliza's eyes. Not trust. It was too soon for that. But perhaps the faintest possibility of hope, quickly smothered by fear. Clara knelt down beside Ethan, her own heart hammering. Hello, Eliza. My name is Clara. I married your father this morning so we could make a home for you. Eliza looked at her. You're my new mother? The question was a trap, Clara realized. Answer yes, and she's replacing someone irreplaceable. Answer no, and she's admitting to being just an obligation. I'm not trying to replace your mother, Clara said carefully. No one could ever do that. But I'm here to take care of you if you'll let me, and I promise to try my very best. Everyone says they'll try, Eliza said flatly. Then they leave anyway. The words cut deeper than any knife. This child had already learned the hardest lesson, that promises meant nothing against the reality of death and abandonment. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. Eliza needed strength right now, not emotion. You're right, Clara said quietly. Sometimes people leave, even when they don't want to. Your mother didn't choose to leave you, but she had to anyway. And that's not fair, and it's not right. But Eliza, I promise you this. I will not choose to leave, and neither will your father. We're choosing to stay. Why? Eliza's voice was small. You don't even know me. Because you deserve people who will stay, Clara said simply, and because we want to know you. If you'll give us the chance. Eliza looked between them, these two strangers making promises she had no reason to believe. Her small hands tightened on her carpet bag. Can I see my room? She asked finally. Relief flooded through Clara. It wasn't acceptance, but it was engagement, a question about the future, however tentative. Of course, Ethan said, standing. We built you a room with, he hesitated, suddenly uncertain, with things we thought you might like. But if you don't like them, we can change everything. We should go, Mrs. Thornton interrupted. I need to complete my inspection before the evening train returns to St. Louis. They loaded into the wagon, Ethan driving, Clara beside him, and Eliza wedged between them with Mrs. Thornton in the back. The arrangement forced proximity, and Clara was acutely aware of the small, rigid body pressed against her side. Eliza stared straight ahead as they rode, her expression carefully blank. Clara wanted to say something comforting, wanted to bridge the terrible gap between them, but she had no idea what words could possibly help. Instead, she simply sat with the child's grief, offering presence instead of platitudes. The ride to the cabin felt endless. When they finally arrived and Ethan helped them down, Mrs. Thornton immediately began her inspection, examining the structure, the food stores, the sleeping arrangements. She was thorough and unforgiving, looking for any excuse to find the situation inadequate. But the cabin passed muster. The walls were sound, the provisions ample, the bedroom clearly prepared for a child. It meets basic requirements, Mrs. Thornton admitted grudgingly, though I have concerns about the isolation. The nearest town is an hour away, Ethan acknowledged. But we have supplies, medical provisions, and I'm experienced in mountain living. Eliza will be safe here. Mrs. Thornton turned to Eliza. Child, do you have any objections to this placement? Eliza looked up at her, this official representative of the system that now controlled her life. Can I go back to St. Louis? No, child. Your mother's family is unavailable. This is your placement. Then I don't have objections, Eliza said quietly. It was the saddest acceptance Clara had ever heard. Not a child embracing a new home, but a child recognizing she had no choice. Mrs. Thornton gathered her papers. Very well. As of this moment, Eliza Grace Wilder is officially placed in the custody of Ethan and Clara Wilder. I'll file the paperwork when I return to St. Louis. You'll receive official notification within the month. She looked at them sternly. I will be conducting follow-up inspections. If I find the child is being neglected or mistreated in any way, she won't be, Clara said firmly. We'll take care of her. Mrs. Thornton nodded curtly and left, accepting Ethan's offer to drive her back to the station. As the wagon pulled away, Clara and Eliza were left alone. The silence was crushing. Clara looked down at this small, orphaned girl standing in the cabin's main room, still clutching her carpet bag, looking lost and alone despite being surrounded by carefully prepared welcome. "Would you like to see your room?" Clara asked gently. Eliza nodded without speaking. Clara led her to the small bedroom, opening the door. Eliza stepped inside slowly, her eyes taking in the carved bed, the curtains, the painted walls. She saw the wooden animals lined up on the dresser, the books on the shelf, the ribbons and hairbrush. For a long moment, she just stood there. Then, very quietly, she set down her carpet bag and picked up one of the carved animals, the rabbit with the alert ears. Her small fingers traced its shape. "Did he make these?" she whispered. "Your father?" "Yes. He's been working on them since he learned you were coming." "He didn't have to." "He wanted to," Clara said. "He wanted you to have something special, something that showed he was thinking about you." Eliza set the rabbit down carefully, her expression unreadable. "I'm tired." "Of course, you've traveled so far. Would you like to rest? We have soup and fresh bread when you're hungry." "I'm not hungry." Clara recognized the lie. Children always claim not to be hungry when overwhelmed, but she didn't push. "If you need anything, I'll be right outside, and your father will be back soon." She left Eliza alone, closing the door gently. Then she leaned against the wall outside, her legs suddenly weak. It was done. Eliza was here. They were now responsible for this broken, grieving child who had every reason not to trust them. Clara heard a small sound from inside the room, a choked sob, quickly smothered. Her heart clenched, but she didn't open the door. Eliza needed space to grieve privately, needed to not feel observed in her pain. So Clara did the only thing she could think of. She went to the kitchen and started preparing dinner, creating the simple domestic rhythm that had soothed so many frightened children before. And she prayed, though she'd stopped believing in prayer 3 years ago, that somehow, impossibly, they would find a way to help this child heal, even if none of them knew how. When Ethan returned from the train station an hour later, the cabin was filled with the smell of fresh bread and simmering soup. He found Clara at the stove, stirring mechanically, her face pale and strained. "Where is she?" he asked quietly. Clara nodded toward the closed bedroom door. "She said she was tired. She's been in there since you left." Ethan moved toward the door, but Clara caught his arm. "Let her be for now. She's crying, trying not to, but I can hear it. She needs time to feel what she's feeling without an audience." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. His daughter was in that room crying, and he was standing here helpless. Every instinct told him to go to her, to try to comfort her. But Clara was right. What comfort could he offer? He was a stranger, less than a stranger. He was the father who'd abandoned her before she was born. "I don't know what to do," he admitted, his voice rough. "Neither do I," Clara said. She looked as lost as he felt. "But we start with dinner. When she's ready, she'll come out. And we'll be here, being as normal as we can manage." Normal. The word felt absurd. Nothing about this situation was normal. But Clara set the table with steady hands, laying out 3 places as if this were an ordinary family preparing for an ordinary meal. Ethan watched her create the illusion of normalcy through sheer force of will. They sat down to wait, the food cooling slowly on the table. The silence was broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock and the occasional pop from the fire. 15 minutes passed, then 30. The soup grew tepid. Finally, the bedroom door opened. Eliza stood in the doorway, her face scrubbed clean but her eyes red and swollen. She'd removed the severe bun, and her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, making her look even younger and more vulnerable. She was still wearing the too large morning dress. "I'm hungry now," she said quietly. "Come sit," Clara said, gesturing to the empty chair between them. "The soup might be a bit cool, but the bread is still warm." Eliza climbed onto the chair, her small frame barely reaching the table properly. Clara served her without fuss, a bowl of soup, a thick slice of bread with butter. Eliza stared at the food for a long moment before picking up her spoon. They ate in painful silence. Ethan kept glancing at his daughter, trying to memorize her features, searching for pieces of himself or Sarah in her face. The dark hair was his. The delicate bone structure was Sarah's. But those eyes, those devastated, guarded eyes, belonged to neither of them. Those were Eliza's alone, forged by loss. "The bread is good," Eliza said finally.
This story was
her voice
posted on the
barely
channel
above a
West
whisper.
of Betrayal.
"Thank
Please
you,"
do not
Claire
repost
replied.
it in any form.
"I'm glad you like it." More silence. Ethan felt like he was drowning in all the things he wanted to say but didn't know how. "I'm sorry. I'll try to be a good father. Please, give me a chance." But the words stuck in his throat, too large and clumsy. "Did you have a long journey?" Clara asked, her tone gentle and conversational. Eliza nodded. 3 days on the train. Mrs. Thornton said we had to change trains twice. That must have been tiring. It was loud, and the seats were hard. Eliza took another spoonful of soup. "My mother and I took a train once to visit her sister in Kansas City, but that was only for a day." The mention of her mother hung in the air like smoke. Ethan saw Clara's hand tighten on her spoon, but her voice remained steady. "What was your mother like?" Clara asked. Ethan shot her a surprised look. Wasn't that too painful a topic? But Eliza's face shifted slightly, some of the blankness fading. "She was pretty," Eliza said. "Everyone said so. She had yellow hair, not dark like mine. And she sang, not just songs, but all the time. When she was cooking or cleaning or walking down the street. She said music made everything better." "That sounds lovely," Clara said. "She got sick in the winter," Eliza continued, her voice flattening again. "It started with a cough. The doctor said it was just a cold, but it got worse. She couldn't breathe right, and then—" She stopped, her small hands gripping the spoon tightly. "She told me to be brave, that someone would take care of me, but she didn't say it would be people I'd never met." The accusation was there again, quiet but sharp. Ethan felt it cut into him. "Your mother didn't know we'd find each other," he said carefully. "The lawyer had to search for me, but Eliza, I wish I'd known about you sooner. I wish I'd been there." "Why weren't you?" The question was direct, childlike in its simplicity, but devastating in its honesty. "Why did you leave my mother?" Ethan set down his spoon, knowing this moment would come but still unprepared for it. "How did you explain adult failings to a 7-year-old? Your mother and I, we cared about each other, but we couldn't make each other happy," he said slowly. "We were too different. She wanted a life in the city, with society and people. I couldn't breathe in cities. I needed open spaces, mountains, solitude. We fought all the time, and I thought leaving would be better for both of us." "But she was going to have a baby," Eliza said, and there was anger beneath the quiet now. "She was going to have me." "I didn't know that," Ethan said, and the weight of those words nearly crushed him. "Your mother never told me. Maybe she tried and I'd already left. Maybe she decided it was better to raise you alone than with someone who made her unhappy. I don't know. But Eliza, if I had known you existed, I would have stayed. I would have tried harder. I would have done things differently." "You don't know that," Eliza said flatly. "You can't know what you would have done." The child was right, and they all knew it. The past couldn't be rewritten with hypothetical good intentions. Clara spoke into the heavy silence. "You're right, Eliza. Your father can't change what happened. Neither can I. The only thing any of us can do is decide what happens now. And right now, we're here. We're not perfect, and we're probably going to make mistakes, but we're here, and we're trying." "What if I don't want you to try?" Eliza asked, and for the first time real emotion cracked through her careful control. "What if I just want my mother back?" "Then that's what you feel," Clara said simply. "And that's okay. You don't have to pretend to be happy about this situation. You don't have to pretend to like us or want to be here. You can be angry and sad and scared. We're not going to punish you for feeling what you feel." Eliza stared at Clara as if trying to determine whether this was a trap. "Mrs. Thornton said I should be grateful that lots of orphans don't get homes." "Mrs. Thornton doesn't know what she's talking about," Clara said firmly. "You're not an orphan who should be grateful for scraps. You're a little girl who lost her mother and deserves to grieve. Being given a home doesn't erase that loss." Something shifted in Eliza's expression, a hairline crack in her careful armor. Her chin trembled slightly before she controlled it. "I don't want to talk anymore," she whispered. "That's fine," Clara said. Would you like more bread? Eliza shook her head. She climbed down from her chair, her movements slow and exhausted. Can I go back to my room? Of course. It's your room. You can go there whenever you want. Eliza walked back to the bedroom, her small shoulders hunched, the door closed with a soft click. Ethan and Clara sat at the table surrounded by the remains of their first family meal. It hadn't been the warm welcome Ethan had desperately hoped for, but it had been honest, painfully, devastatingly honest. I handled that badly, Ethan said. No, you didn't, Clara replied. You told her the truth. That's what we agreed on. But the truth hurt her. The truth is supposed to hurt right now. Her mother is dead. That truth is going to hurt for a long time. Clara began clearing the dishes. What would hurt worse is if we lied to her, built up false hope, pretended this was something it isn't. Children can smell dishonesty, and they hate it. Ethan watched her move around the kitchen with practiced efficiency. You're different with her than you are with me. Softer. Clara paused, a plate in her hands. Children need softness. Adults can handle harder truths. But you're scared, Ethan observed. I can see it. Terrified, Clara admitted. Every word I say to her feels like walking on ice. One wrong step and everything cracks. She set the plate down heavily. I keep thinking about Thomas, about all the ways I failed him, and I'm so afraid I'll fail her too. You won't. You don't know that. I know you asked about her mother when most people would have avoided the topic, Ethan said. You gave her permission to grieve instead of demanding gratitude. You're already doing better than you think. Clara turned away, but not before Ethan saw the tears she was trying to hide. It's been one evening. We have years ahead of us, years of opportunities to fail. Or to succeed, Ethan countered. They finished cleaning up in silence, establishing a rhythm without conscious thought. Clara washing, Ethan drying, both of them aware of the closed bedroom door and the grieving child behind it. When the kitchen was clean, they stood awkwardly in the main room, both exhausted but neither willing to address the elephant in the room, sleeping arrangements. I'll take the floor, Ethan said finally. You should have the bed. Oh, Clara looked at the small bedroom that had been Ethan's until this morning. We're married. People will expect us to share. There are no people here to expect anything, Ethan pointed out, and we both know this isn't that kind of marriage. Still, Eliza might wonder. Eliza has enough to worry about without adult complications, Ethan said firmly. I'll bed down by the fire. I've slept in worse places. Clara nodded, too tired to argue. She retrieved her small bag of belongings from where Ethan had placed it and went into the bedroom, closing the door behind her. Ethan built up the fire and spread his bedroll on the floor. The cabin settled into night sounds, wood popping, wind in the pines outside, the distant call of an owl. He lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the small girl sleeping just beyond that wall. His daughter. The concept still felt unreal. 7 years of her life had passed without him. 7 years of first steps and first words and scraped knees and nightmares. 7 years of Sarah raising her alone, never sending word, never asking for help. Had Sarah hated him that much? Or had she simply decided he wasn't worth the effort of finding? He'd never know now. Sarah was dead, and all her reasons had died with her. What remained was Eliza, a living, breathing consequence of choices made years ago. A child who had every right to hate him, but who was too exhausted and grief-stricken to even muster that much emotion. Somewhere in the night, Ethan finally fell into uneasy sleep. He woke to screaming. Ethan was on his feet before he was fully conscious, his heart hammering. The screams were coming from Eliza's room, high-pitched and terrified, the sound of a child trapped in nightmare. Clara emerged from the bedroom at the same moment, her hair loose and her face pale. They both moved toward Eliza's door. Should we go in? Ethan asked. Another scream, followed by sobbing. Clara opened the door. Eliza was tangled in her blankets, thrashing and crying, still trapped in whatever horror her dreams had conjured. Clara moved to the bedside without hesitation, sitting on the edge of the mattress. Eliza, sweetheart, wake up. You're dreaming. Wake up. The child's eyes opened, wild and unfocused. She looked at Clara without recognition, still caught between sleep and waking. It's all right, Clara said softly. You're safe. You're in your room. Nothing's going to hurt you. Mama? Eliza's voice was small and broken. Clara's face crumpled for just an instant before she controlled it. No, sweetheart. It's Clara. But you're safe. I promise you're safe. Reality crashed back
This
into
story was
Eliza's
posted
eyes.
on the channel
The
West of
recognition of where she
Betrayal.
was, who
Please
these
do not
people were,
repost it in
and
any
the
form.
devastating truth that her mother was gone. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I dreamed she was still here, Eliza sobbed. I dreamed it was all wrong, that she wasn't dead, that we were still in our house in St. Louis. But then I woke up and she couldn't finish, overcome by grief too large for her small body to contain. Clara gathered the child into her arms, and Eliza collapsed against her, crying with the abandoned desperation of someone who'd been holding everything in for too long. Her small body shook with the force of it. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, watching his daughter break apart in a stranger's arms. He wanted to help, wanted to do something, but he had no idea what. This wasn't a problem he could solve with his hands. This required something he didn't know how to give. Clara held Eliza and let her cry, not offering empty platitudes or telling her to calm down. She simply held on, absorbing the storm of grief. Gradually, the sobs began to quiet. Eliza's breathing slowed, though she still clung to Clara's nightgown with desperate fists. I miss her so much, Eliza whispered. I know, Clara said. I know you do. It hurts. It's supposed to hurt. That's how you know the love was real. Clara smoothed the child's tangled hair. But Eliza, I promise you, it won't always hurt this much. Right now it feels like it will never stop, but slowly, little by little, it will get easier to breathe. The love will stay, but the pain will soften. How do you know? Clara was quiet for a moment. Because I lost someone too. Someone I loved very much. And for a long time I thought the pain would destroy me. But it didn't. It changed me. But it didn't destroy me. And eventually, I could remember them without feeling like I was drowning. Eliza pulled back slightly, looking at Clara's face. Who did you lose? A little boy named Thomas. I was supposed to take care of him, and I failed. He died because I wasn't paying attention. The confession hung in the air. Ethan stared at Clara in shock. He hadn't expected her to tell Eliza about Thomas. Not now. Not when the child was already overwhelmed with her own grief. But Eliza's expression shifted. You didn't mean to let him die? No, but he died anyway. Like my mama. She didn't mean to leave me, but she died anyway. Yes, Clara said. Sometimes terrible things happen even when no one wants them to, even when we try our hardest to prevent them. Eliza absorbed this, her young mind working through the implications. Do you still miss Thomas? Every day. Does it still hurt? Sometimes, Clara admitted, but not like it did at first. At first it felt like I couldn't survive it. Now I can think about him and remember the good things too, not just the ending. Eliza wiped her nose on her sleeve. I don't want to forget my mama. You won't, Clara promised. We'll make sure of that. You can tell us about her whenever you want. We'll listen to every story, every memory. She's part of you, and we're not going to ask you to pretend she didn't exist. The child's rigid posture softened slightly. Mrs. Thornton said I shouldn't talk about her, that it would make things harder. Mrs. Thornton was wrong, Ethan said from the doorway. Both females turned to look at him. He stepped into the room, kneeling beside the bed. Your mother deserves to be remembered. Tell us about her. Tell us everything. Eliza looked between them uncertainly. Everything? Everything you want to share, Clara said. So Eliza talked. She talked about Sarah's yellow hair and her singing, about the small apartment they'd shared in St. Louis, with its cracked window that let in cold air and its creaky stairs. She talked about how Sarah had worked as a seamstress, taking in mending and alterations, her fingers always moving, always creating. She talked about the stories Sarah told, fairy tales and folk tales and made-up stories about a brave little girl who could do anything. About how Sarah made every birthday special even though they had no money, creating celebrations out of nothing but love and imagination. She talked about the illness, how Sarah had kept working even when she was coughing because they needed the money, how she'd finally collapsed and the neighbors had helped get her to a doctor, how Eliza had sat beside her mother's bed holding her hand, watching her waste away. At the end, she couldn't talk anymore, Eliza said, her voice small. But she squeezed my hand 3 times. That was our code. 3 squeezes meant, I love you. And then she stopped, unable to continue. She's gone, Clara finished gently. Eliza nodded, fresh tears sliding down her face. But these tears were different somehow, not the trapped, desperate tears from before. These were cleaner, flowing from a grief that had finally found voice. When the story was finished, Eliza sagged back against the pillows, exhausted. Clara tucked the blankets around her. Will you stay? Eliza asked suddenly. Clara froze. Do you want me to? I don't want to be alone. Then I'll stay. Clara settled into the chair beside the bed, prepared to keep vigil through the night. Both of you? Eliza's eyes moved to Ethan. Ethan felt his throat tighten. I can stay too. He pulled over the other chair, the one he'd made specifically for this room, and sat on the opposite side of the bed. They bracketed her, these 2 strangers who'd promised to become her parents, keeping watch over her grief. Eliza's eyes drifted closed, but her hand snaked out from under the blankets, reaching tentatively toward Clara. Clara took it without hesitation, holding the small hand gently. On the other side of the bed, Ethan saw his daughter's other hand lying on top of the blanket. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and covered it with his own. Eliza's fingers were so small beneath his rough, calloused palm. She didn't pull away. They sat like that in the darkness, connected by the fragile threads of touch and presence. Eliza's breathing gradually evened out as she slipped into sleep, but neither adult moved. They stayed, fulfilling the simple but profound promise they'd made. We will not choose to leave. As the night deepened and the moon tracked across the sky beyond the window, Ethan found himself studying his daughter's sleeping face. In repose, the guardedness faded slightly. She looked younger, more vulnerable. This was the child he should have known from the beginning, the infant, the toddler, the growing girl. All those years lost, irretrievable. But this moment, this quiet vigil in the mountain darkness, this was real. This was happening now. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something that could matter. Across the bed, Clara's eyes met his. In the dim light, he saw his own fear and determination reflected back. They were in this together now, bound by more than just a legal document, bound by the responsibility of this broken child sleeping between them. When dawn began to lighten the sky, Eliza was still sleeping peacefully, her hand still held in Clara's. Ethan's back ached from the uncomfortable chair, and his eyes burned from lack of sleep, but he didn't care. His daughter had asked him to stay, and he'd stayed. It was the first promise he'd managed to keep. Clara carefully extracted her hand from Eliza's grip and stood, stretching stiffly. She gestured toward the door, and Ethan followed her into the main room, pulling the bedroom door partially closed behind them. We need to talk about today, Clara whispered, about how we handle things. What do you mean? She's going to wake up and face reality all over again. The nightmare of losing her mother, the strangeness of being here, all of it. We need to have a plan. Ethan rubbed his face, trying to think through the fog of exhaustion. A routine? Something predictable? Yes. Children need structure, especially when everything else is chaos. We establish meal times, quiet times, basic expectations. We give her something to hold on to. I've never had to think about schedules before, Ethan admitted. I wake when the sun rises, eat when I'm hungry, sleep when I'm tired. That works for an adult living alone. It doesn't work for a child who needs stability. Clara moved to the kitchen, starting to prepare breakfast through sheer force of habit. We need rules, boundaries, and consistency, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Ethan watched her work, struck by how naturally she'd stepped into this role. You said you were terrified. I am, but being terrified doesn't exempt me from doing what needs to be done. Clara cracked eggs into a bowl. Fear is just a feeling. It doesn't get to make decisions. Before Ethan could respond, they heard movement from Eliza's room. The bedroom door opened and the child emerged, her hair tangled and her face puffy from crying. She stood in the doorway, looking lost. Good morning, Eliza, Clara said gently. Did you sleep all right after earlier? Eliza nodded silently. I'm making breakfast. Are you hungry? Another nod. Would you like to help? I could use someone to set the table. Eliza hesitated, then moved forward slowly. Clara showed her where the plates and utensils were kept, and the child carried them to the table
This
one
story
at a
was
time,
posted on the
focusing
channel
intently on the
West of
simple
Betrayal.
task.
Please do
Ethan
not
stood
repost
back,
it in
watching
any
this
form.
small domestic scene unfold. Eliza moving carefully around the unfamiliar cabin, Clara guiding without pushing. Both of them navigating this strange new reality with careful steps. When breakfast was ready, they sat down together, their second meal as a family. The food was simple but warm, and this time Eliza ate without being prompted. What do people do here? She asked suddenly. Do? Ethan repeated. In the mountains, there's no school, no other children. What do people do all day? It was a legitimate question, and Ethan realized he had no good answer. His days were filled with solitary tasks, chopping wood, hunting, maintaining the cabin and property. None of that involved a 7-year-old. We'll figure that out together, Clara said. But there's plenty to do. We can read and I can teach you lessons like you'd learn in school. We can explore the woods safely with your father. We can cook and bake. And I'm sure there are lots of things to discover that we haven't thought of yet. I liked school, Eliza said quietly. My teacher was Miss Hampton. She said I was good at reading. Then we'll make sure you keep reading, Clara promised. We have books, and I can teach you. You were a teacher? A governess. That's someone who teaches children in their homes. Eliza absorbed this. So you know about children. Clara's hand tightened on her fork. I used to. The words carried weight that Eliza couldn't fully understand, but she seemed to sense the pain beneath them. She didn't press further. After breakfast, Clara assigned simple tasks. Eliza helped clear the table, learning where things belonged in this new kitchen. Then Clara suggested they sort through Eliza's belongings, put away her clothes properly, make the room truly hers. Ethan watched them disappear into the bedroom together, then stood alone in the main room, feeling useless. He was accustomed to physical labor, to concrete tasks with visible results. But parenting, this delicate dance of emotional support and careful boundaries, was completely foreign territory. He went outside to chop wood, needing to do something productive. The morning was cold but clear, the mountain air sharp in his lungs. As his axe bit into the logs, he tried to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Married, father, responsible for a grieving 7-year-old who had every reason to hate him. The weight of it was crushing. Inside the cabin, Clara helped Eliza unpack her small carpet bag. There wasn't much, a few dresses, all too worn and too large, some undergarments, a single pair of shoes with holes in the soles, and wrapped carefully in a piece of cloth, a small wooden box. What's this? Clara asked gently. Eliza opened the box with reverent care. Inside was a lock of yellow hair tied with a faded ribbon, a few buttons, and a tarnished thimble. My mother's things, Eliza whispered. This was her hair, and she used this thimble when she sewed. The buttons are from her favorite dress. Clara felt tears burning her eyes. These are precious. We'll keep them safe. Mrs. Thornton said I should leave them behind, that I should start fresh. Mrs. Thornton was wrong about a lot of things, Clara said firmly. She placed the box reverently on the dresser, in a place of honor. Your mother's memory deserves to be kept, not discarded. Eliza's face crumpled. I'm afraid I'll forget her. What she looked like. What her voice sounded like. Clara sat down on the bed, drawing the child close. Tell me something about her voice.
This story was posted on the
What did it
channel
sound
West
like?
of Betrayal. Please
It was
do not
soft,
repost it in
but
any
strong
form.
too, when she needed it to be. And when she sang, Eliza closed her eyes, remembering. When she sang, it felt like everything was going to be all right, even when it wasn't. Then whenever you need to remember, you close your eyes and think about that feeling, about how her singing made you feel safe. That's how you keep her close. They sat together in the quiet room, surrounded by wooden animals and careful preparations, holding space for a grief that would take years to fully process. Outside, Ethan's axe continued its rhythmic splitting of wood, the sound echoing across the mountain clearing. And slowly, painfully, impossibly, 3 broken people began the long work of trying to become a family. The days that followed were brutal in ways Ethan had never anticipated. He'd face blizzards and broken bones, hunger and isolation, but nothing had prepared him for the raw difficulty of trying to connect with a child who viewed him as a stranger at best and an abandoner at worst. Eliza moved through the cabin like a ghost, present but not engaged. She answered questions in monosyllables, performed assigned tasks mechanically, and spent hours staring out the window at the mountains as if calculating the distance back to the life she'd lost. Clara established routines with determined consistency. Breakfast at 7. Lessons from 9 to noon, reading, writing, arithmetic taught at the kitchen table with patient precision. Lunch at 1. Quiet time in the afternoon. Dinner at 6. Bedtime at 8. Eliza followed the schedule without complaint and without enthusiasm. She was cooperative in the way of a prisoner who had accepted their sentence, going through motions because resistance required more energy than compliance. The nightmares came almost every night. Sometimes Eliza screamed herself awake. Sometimes Clara or Ethan would hear muffled crying through the closed door. They always went to her, took turns sitting in the chair beside her bed, offering presence, if not comfort. Ethan felt increasingly useless. He could provide for them. There was food and firewood and safety from the elements, but the emotional work, the careful navigation of grief and trauma, fell almost entirely to Clara. She was the one Eliza turned to when waking from nightmares. She was the one who could coax the child to eat when grief stole her appetite. She was the one who seemed to instinctively know when to push and when to give space. Ethan's contributions felt clumsy by comparison. He tried to engage Eliza in conversation and received silence. He attempted to teach her about the mountain environment and saw only polite disinterest. Everything he did seemed to highlight the vast distance between them. 2 weeks into this new arrangement, Clara found him on the porch at dawn, his coffee growing cold in his hands as he stared at nothing. "You're avoiding her," Clara said quietly. Ethan didn't deny it. "I don't know how to talk to her. Everything I say comes out wrong." "So you say nothing at all?" "Better than saying the wrong thing." Clara sat down beside him on the porch steps. "That's cowardice, Ethan. You married me and brought her here specifically so you could be her father. Now you're hiding because it's hard." The words stung precisely because they were true. "She doesn't want me to be her father. She tolerates my presence, but she doesn't want me. She's 7 years old and grieving. She doesn't know what she wants except for her mother to be alive again." Clara's voice was sharp but not unkind. "But she needs you to try anyway, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. You make it look easy." "I spent 3 years running from exactly this situation because I was too afraid to face it," Clara said. "Nothing about this is easy, but Eliza needs more than one person trying. She needs both of us showing up, even when we feel inadequate." Ethan took a long breath of cold mountain air. "What if I fail her?" "Then you fail her while trying, not while hiding." Clara stood, brushing off her skirt. "She's in there right now, and she's lonely. Talk to her. Even if it's awkward, even if you don't know what to say, just try." When Clara went back inside, Ethan remained on the porch, gathering his courage. Finally, he stood and followed her in. Eliza was at the kitchen table, dutifully working through the arithmetic problems Clara had assigned. Her small hand gripped the pencil with fierce concentration, her tongue caught between her teeth as she worked. Ethan pulled out a chair across from her. "Can I show you something?" Eliza looked up warily. "I'm doing my lessons." "I know, but this will only take a minute." Ethan pulled out his pocket knife and a small piece of wood. "I wanted to teach you how to carve." Interest flickered in Eliza's eyes before she controlled it. "Why?" "Because you seem to like the animals I made for your room. I thought maybe you'd like to make something yourself." "I don't know how." "That's why I'm offering to teach you." Ethan showed her the wood, a small, smooth piece perfect for a beginner. "We'd start simple, just learning how to hold the knife, how to make basic cuts. Nothing complicated." Eliza stared at the wood, clearly torn between curiosity and her determination to maintain emotional distance. "I could carve you a horse," Ethan said, "or you could learn to carve one yourself. Your choice." The challenge worked. Eliza set down her pencil. "Fine. Show me." Ethan pulled his chair around to sit beside her rather than across from her. He placed the wood in her small hand, then carefully positioned the knife.
This story was posted on
rule,
the channel west
Always
of
cut away from
Betrayal.
yourself.
Please
Never
do not
toward.
repost it
See
in
how
any
I'm holding
form.
it? The blade moves outward. He demonstrated slowly, peeling off a thin curl of wood. Your turn. Eliza gripped the knife with fierce determination, trying to replicate his motion. Her first attempt was clumsy, barely scratching the surface. Too gentle, Ethan said. You need to commit to the cut. More pressure, but controlled. Try again. This time, a small curl of wood came away. Eliza's face lit up with surprised pride before she remembered to be guarded. Good, Ethan said. Now do it again. 20 more cuts just like that, learning how the wood responds. They worked in silence, Eliza making careful cuts while Ethan watched and occasionally corrected her grip or angle. After 20 cuts, the wood had begun to take on a different shape. Nothing recognizable yet, but potential beginning to emerge. What am I making? Eliza asked. What do you want to make? She considered. A bird? Like the ones I see in the trees outside my window. A bird it is. Ethan pulled out a piece of paper and sketched a simple bird shape. This is what we're aiming for. It'll take time, probably a few days of work, but if you're patient, it'll come together. Eliza studied the sketch with serious intensity. Will you help me? Every step, Ethan promised. Clara watched from the kitchen area, her hands stilled in the bread dough she'd been kneading. This was the first real conversation she'd witnessed between father and daughter, the first voluntary engagement from Eliza. It wasn't a breakthrough. The wall between them was still firmly in place. But it was a crack in the foundation, small but significant. Over the following days, the carving became their ritual. Every afternoon after lessons, Ethan would sit with Eliza at the table and they'd work together on the bird. He taught her how to read the grain of the wood, how to use different knives for different cuts, how to be patient with the process. Eliza proved to have steady hands and intense focus. When she concentrated on the carving, the grief that usually shadowed her face would fade slightly. She'd lose herself in the careful work, in the transformation of rough wood into something deliberate and beautiful. Why did you start carving? She asked one afternoon, not looking up from her work. Ethan considered the question. Because in the mountains, you're alone a lot. Too much silence can make a person go a little crazy. Carving gave me something to do with my hands, something to focus on besides my own thoughts. Were you lonely? The directness of the question caught him off guard. Yes, very. Then why did you stay? Because sometimes being alone feels safer than being around people. People can hurt you, disappoint you, leave you. The mountains just are. They don't ask anything from you. Eliza made another careful cut before responding. But they're also cold. And empty. Ethan looked at his daughter, this wise, wounded 7-year-old who understood isolation far too well for her age. You're right. I traded connection for safety, and I'm not sure it was a good trade. Is that why you wanted me to come here? So you wouldn't be lonely anymore? No. Ethan set down his own carving to give her his full attention. I wanted you here because you're my daughter. Because the moment I learned you existed, I knew I couldn't let you disappear into the system. Even if having you here is harder than being alone, and it is harder, in different ways, I'd make the same choice. Every time. Eliza's hands stilled on her carving. Even though I don't like you very much? The words cut, but Ethan forced himself not to flinch.
This story was posted on the channel west of Betrayal.
You don't have to
Please
forgive
do
me
not
for not being
repost
there
it
before.
in any form.
But I'm here now, and I'm staying. Everyone says they're staying, Eliza whispered, and then they don't. Your mother didn't choose to leave you. I know, but she still left. Eliza's voice cracked. And maybe you won't choose to leave either, but what if you do? What if I start to like it here, start to feel safe, and then something happens? Ethan understood then what he was really fighting, not Eliza's anger at his past absence, but her terror of future abandonment. She was protecting herself by refusing to invest in this new life, by keeping her heart locked away where it couldn't be broken again. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen, Ethan said carefully. Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise that I will fight with everything I have to stay. And if something happens to me, Clara will still be here. You won't be alone. How do you know? She married you for the land. The lawyer told Mrs. Thornton everything, that you had to find a wife fast, that you gave away your property to get one. Clara doesn't have to stay if you're gone. Ethan's stomach clenched. So Eliza knew about the arrangement, had probably known from the beginning. He'd underestimated how much adults revealed in front of children, assuming the child wasn't listening or wouldn't understand. Before he could respond, Clara's voice came from across the room. You're right, Eliza. I did marry your father for land and security. That's the truth. Clara had been reading in the corner, so still and quiet that Ethan had half forgotten she was there. Now she set down her book and walked to the table, sitting down across from them. I married Ethan because he offered me something I needed, Clara continued, her voice steady. A home, a purpose, a reason to stop running from my past. And yes, the initial agreement was that I could leave after a year if I wanted to, and I'd keep the property. Eliza's face was carefully blank, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. So, you'll leave, when the year is up. I didn't say that, Clara leaned forward. The arrangement was made before I met you, before I understood what this would actually mean. And Eliza, I need to tell you something, but I need you to really hear it. The child nodded slowly. 3 years ago, I was responsible for a little boy named Thomas. I've told you about him, how he died because I failed to protect him. After that, I ran away. I changed my name, moved west, built a life where I never had to be responsible for anyone again. I was convinced I wasn't capable of caring for a child, that I'd already proven myself unworthy. But you take care of me, Eliza said quietly. I do. And every single day I'm terrified I'll fail you the way I failed Thomas. Every decision I make, every word I say to you, I second guess. I wake up at night checking to make sure you're still breathing because I'm afraid something will happen on my watch. Then why do you stay? Clara's eyes filled with tears. Because running didn't fix anything. It didn't bring Thomas back. It didn't erase my guilt. All it did was ensure I'd never have the chance to try again, to maybe do better. And then your father walked into that store with his impossible request, and I had a choice, keep running or stand still and face the thing that scared me most. Being responsible for another child, Eliza said. Being responsible for you, Clara corrected. And somewhere in the last few weeks, Eliza, something changed. This stopped being about fulfilling an obligation or earning land. When I sit with you at night after nightmares, when I teach you lessons at this table, when I watch you work on your carving, I'm not doing it because I have to. I'm doing it because I want to, because you matter to me. Eliza's carefully constructed walls cracked visibly. You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because it's true. Clara reached across the table, stopping just short of touching Eliza's hand. I know you're protecting yourself. I know you think if you don't let yourself care about us, it won't hurt as much when we leave or disappoint you. But Eliza, we're already here. We're already in this. And whether you let yourself care about us or not, we care about you. You can't, Eliza whispered. You barely know me. I know you're brave even when you're terrified. I know you ask hard questions and deserve honest answers. I know you loved your mother deeply and honor her memory every day. I know you're smart and creative and stronger than any 7-year-old should have to be. Clara's voice broke. I know those things, and they make me care about you. Not because I'm obligated to, but because of who you are. The tears Eliza had been holding back spilled over. What if I start to love you back and then you leave anyway? Then you'll have loved us, Clara said simply. And love, even love that ends in loss, is worth more than safety that comes from never letting anyone in. I learned that the hard way. Eliza stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. For a moment, Ethan thought she would run to her room, slam the door, retreat into the safety of isolation. Instead, she walked around the table and stood in front of Clara, her small body trembling with suppressed emotion. I don't want to be alone anymore, she whispered. Clara opened her arms and Eliza collapsed into them, finally allowing herself to be held without resistance. She cried, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and wounded. Clara held her tightly, rocking slightly, murmuring wordless comfort. Ethan watched, his own eyes burning. This was the moment he'd been waiting for, the crack becoming a genuine breakthrough. But it also highlighted his own distance from the bond forming between Clara and Eliza. He was still on the outside looking in. As if reading his thoughts, Eliza pulled back from Clara and looked at him. Her face was blotchy and tear-stained, her eyes red and swollen. "You too," she said. Ethan blinked. "What?" "You're part of this too, both of you." Eliza's voice was stronger now, despite the tears. "I'm scared, and I'm still angry that you weren't there before. But if we're doing this, if we're trying to be a family, then it has to be all of us." She held out one small hand toward him. Ethan's throat closed. He looked at that outstretched hand, his daughter's hand, offered freely for the first time, and felt something break open in his chest. He took her hand carefully, afraid his rough grip might hurt her delicate bones. Eliza used their joined hands to pull him closer until he was kneeling on the floor beside Clara's chair. Then, with a decisiveness that seemed beyond her years, she wrapped one arm around Clara's neck and one around Ethan's. They stayed like that, the three of them tangled together in an awkward embrace, held together by need and hope and the terrifying possibility of becoming something real. When they finally separated, Eliza wiped her face on her sleeve and picked up her carving again, as if the emotional explosion hadn't just happened. "Will you keep helping me with the bird?" she asked Ethan, her voice almost normal. "Every day," Ethan promised. That night, for the first time since arriving, Eliza didn't have a nightmare. She slept through until dawn, and when she emerged from her room, something in her posture had shifted. She was still guarded, that wouldn't disappear overnight, but the rigid defensiveness had softened slightly. At breakfast, she actually initiated conversation. "Can we make pancakes? My mother used to make them on Sundays." "I think we can manage that," Clara said. "Do you remember how she made them?" "She added cinnamon, and she made them into shapes, circles mostly, but sometimes hearts or stars." "Then that's what we'll do." They made pancakes together, Eliza standing on a stool to reach the counter, Clara guiding her through the process. Ethan watched from the table, marveling at how quickly the cabin was filling with life. Just weeks ago, it had been silent and solitary, his only companions the wind and his own thoughts. Now it held laughter, tentative and fragile, but real. "Papa, you have to try this one," Eliza said, carrying over a slightly misshapen pancake. "I made it look like a bear." "Papa." The word stopped Ethan's heart. Eliza froze too, realizing what she'd said, her eyes going wide with something like panic. I didn't mean to." "I love it," Ethan interrupted, his voice rough. "It's the best bear pancake I've ever seen." Eliza searched his face for mockery or rejection and found neither. Slowly she relaxed. "You can eat it then. I'll make Clara a star." The moment passed, but the word hung in the air between them. "Papa." Not father, too formal. Not Ethan, too distant. "Papa," the word of a child claiming a parent. Clara met Ethan's eyes across the kitchen, and he saw his own wonder reflected there. This broken, grieving child was choosing them. Not completely. Trust would take time, and the process would be full of setbacks. But she was trying. She was reaching out despite her fear. Later that afternoon, Ethan took Eliza outside for the first time since her arrival. They walked through the woods near the cabin, Ethan pointing out animal tracks in the soft earth, teaching her how to move quietly, how to read the forest. "A deer came through here last night," he said, showing her the distinctive hoof prints. "See how deep these impressions are? That tells you the deer was moving quickly, probably running from something. What would chase a deer? Could be a mountain lion, or maybe just a noise that spooked it." He moved further along the trail. "And here, see these scratches?"
This story
on the
was
tree bark?
posted on the channel
Bear
west
marking
of
its
Betrayal.
territory.
Please do not
Eliza studied
repost
the
it
marks
in
with
any form.
intense focus. "Are there a lot of bears?" "Enough that you need to be careful. Never go into the woods alone. Never run from a bear if you see one. That triggers their chase instinct. And never ever get between a mother bear and her cubs." "What do you do if you see one?" "Make yourself look big. Make noise. Usually they'll leave you alone if you show you're not prey and you're not threatening their young." Ethan demonstrated, raising his arms above his head. "Like this." Eliza giggled, a sound so unexpected and precious that Ethan nearly stopped breathing. She copied his pose, making herself as tall as her small frame allowed. "Am I scary?" she asked, trying to make her voice deep and fierce. "Terrifying," Ethan said seriously. "That bear would take one look and run for its life." She giggled again, and this time it turned into real laughter. Ethan found himself laughing too, both of them standing in the middle of the mountain forest with their arms raised, pretending to scare imaginary bears. When their laughter faded, Eliza lowered her arms and looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What?" Ethan asked. "I like it here," she said quietly. "I didn't think I would. I thought I'd hate the mountains and want to go back to the city. But it's peaceful. Quiet in a good way, not a lonely way." "I'm glad," Ethan said. "I was worried you'd find it too isolated." "I was isolated in St. Louis too," Eliza said. "After Mama got sick, the other children wouldn't play with me anymore. Their parents were afraid they'd catch what she had. So I stayed inside our apartment, taking care of her, talking to no one but the doctor and the landlady." She kicked at a pine cone. "At least here the loneliness is honest. It's just distance, not people choosing to look away." The observation was devastatingly perceptive. Ethan crouched down to her level. "You're not alone here, Eliza. You have me and Clara. And maybe we're not much yet. Maybe we're still figuring this out. But we're here, and we're not looking away." "I know." She said it simply, stating a fact rather than offering reassurance. "That's why I called you Papa. I didn't mean to, but maybe it's okay that I did?" Ethan's eyes burned. "It's more than okay. It's the best gift you could have given me." They walked further into the woods, and Ethan showed her a hidden meadow where wildflowers would bloom in spring. He taught her the names of different trees, how to identify pine from fir, from spruce. He showed her a stream where fish gathered, promising to teach her to catch them when the weather warmed. Eliza absorbed everything with fierce attention, asking questions, touching bark and leaves, filing away knowledge. She had her mother's curiosity and what Ethan was beginning to recognize as his own intensity. When they returned to the cabin, Clara had dinner ready, a venison stew that had been simmering all afternoon. The three of them sat together at the table, and for the first time the conversation flowed naturally. Eliza told Clara about the bear tracks in the meadow. Clara shared a story about teaching Thomas to identify birds by their calls. Ethan contributed occasional observations, content mostly to listen. This was what a family sounded like, he realized. Not perfect harmony, but voices joining together, creating something more than the sum of individual parts. After dinner, as Clara cleaned dishes and Ethan added wood to the fire, Eliza pulled out her carving and worked on it at the table. The bird was taking shape now, wings emerging from rough wood, a head becoming distinct from the body. She worked with her tongue between her teeth, completely absorbed. When bedtime came, Eliza hesitated at her bedroom door. "Will you tell me a story? Both of you?" They followed her into the small room. Eliza climbed into bed and Clara sat on one side while Ethan took the chair on the other, the configuration that had become familiar from nightmare vigils, now repurposed for something gentler. "What kind of story?" Clara asked. "A story about being brave," Eliza said. "But a real one, not a fairy tale. Tell me about a time when you were scared but did the thing anyway." Clara and Ethan exchanged glances. Clara nodded slightly. "You first." Ethan thought for a moment. "When I was about your age, maybe a year older, my father took me hunting for the first time. We were tracking a deer, and I was so scared I was shaking. Not of the deer, of disappointing my father, of missing the shot, of proving I wasn't brave enough." "What happened?" Eliza asked. "We found the deer. My father handed me the rifle. It was almost too heavy for me to hold properly, and I was supposed to take the shot, but I couldn't make myself do it. I just stood there, frozen, while the deer started to walk away." "Did your father get angry?" "No. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, 'Bravery isn't not being scared. Bravery is being scared and pulling the trigger anyway.' Then he helped me steady the rifle and we took the shot together." Eliza absorbed this. "Did you get the deer?" "We did. And I learned that being scared doesn't make you weak. It just makes you human. The brave part is doing what needs to be done despite the fear. Like you coming to find a wife even though it was embarrassing and hard," Eliza said. "Exactly like that." Eliza turned to Clara. "Your turn." Clara was quiet for a long moment. "The bravest thing I've ever done was agreeing to marry your father and meet you. I've told you about Thomas, about how I failed him. After he died, I was so scared of failing again that I stopped trying. I ran away from anything that required me to be responsible for someone else. And then Ethan walked into that store, and I had to choose. Keep running or face my fear. What made you choose to face it? You, Clara said simply. Ethan told me about a 7-year-old girl who was about to lose her only chance at a family, and I thought about how unfair that was, how you deserved better than adults too scared to try. So I decided to be brave, even though I was terrified. Are you still scared? Eliza asked. Every day, Clara admitted, but less than I was. And what I've learned is that the fear doesn't go away just because you face it once. You have to keep facing it, over and over. That's the real bravery. Not one big moment of courage, but daily choice to keep trying despite the fear. Eliza nodded seriously, processing this. I'm scared too. That you'll leave, or that something bad will happen, or that I'll start to feel safe, and then everything will fall apart again. That's a reasonable fear, Ethan said. Life is unpredictable. We can't promise nothing bad will happen. But we can promise to face whatever happens together, Clara added. That's what families do. They don't promise everything will be perfect. They promise to be there for each other when it's not. Eliza reached out, taking one of Clara's hands and one of Ethan's. I want to try. To be brave like you. To be a family, even though it's scary. Then we try together, Clara said. They sat like that, hands linked in the lamplight, until Eliza's eyes grew heavy. Clara tucked the blankets around her and Ethan turned down the lamp. They left her door slightly ajar, close enough to hear if she needed them, but giving her privacy. In the main room, Ethan sank into a chair by the fire, exhausted but lighter somehow. She called me Papa. I heard, Clara said, a slight smile on her face. How did it feel? Terrifying. Like she just handed me her heart and trusted me not to break it. That's exactly what she did. Clara sat across from him. We can't fail her, Ethan. What if we do anyway? Then we fail while trying our hardest. That's all anyone can do. Clara stared into the fire. I keep thinking about Thomas, about all the ways I could have done better. But at least with Eliza, I'm here. I'm showing up. If I fail, it won't be because I ran away. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, the mountain wind sighing against the cabin walls. Outside, the darkness was complete. No city lights, no neighboring windows, just the vast wilderness and the fragile human connection they were building within it. Ethan thought about the man he'd been just a month ago, solitary, self-sufficient, convinced that isolation was safer than connection. That man seemed like a stranger now. In his place was someone learning to be a father, learning to share space and responsibility, learning that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let someone else see your fear. And beside him, Clara was making her own transformation, from a woman running from guilt to one facing it daily, from someone who'd built walls to protect herself to someone tearing them down one careful brick at a time. Between them, binding them together, was Eliza, a grieving child choosing to be brave, choosing to risk her heart despite every reason not to. They were a family built from broken pieces, held together by courage and hope, and the simple, powerful decision to keep trying. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't be easy, but it was real, and it was theirs, and they would fight to protect it, together. The weeks turned into months, and autumn descended on the mountains with breathtaking violence. The aspens turned gold, then shed their leaves in great rustling waves. Morning frost coated the cabin's windows in intricate patterns. The air grew sharp enough to sting the lungs.
This story was posted on the channel west
of the
of
brutal
Betrayal.
winter to come.
Please do not repost
Eliza's
it in any
carved
form.
bird was finally finished. She'd worked on it every day, her small hands growing more confident with each cut. The final piece was rough compared to Ethan's work, but it had character. Wings spread as if caught mid-flight, head turned slightly as if listening for something only it could hear. It's beautiful, Clara said when Eliza presented it at breakfast one morning. What kind of bird is it? A bluebird, Eliza said. Mama always said bluebirds meant hope, that when you saw one, it was the world reminding you to keep going. She placed the carved bird carefully on the mantel, next to the wooden box containing her mother's hair and thimble. The juxtaposition was deliberate, Clara realized. The past and the present, grief and hope, existing side by side. I want to make something else now, Eliza announced. Something harder. Ethan smiled. What did you have in mind? A family, a papa bear, a mama bear, and a baby bear. Can you show me how? The request landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. Ethan's throat tightened visibly, and Clara felt her own eyes burn. This child, who'd been so careful not to claim them, who'd held herself apart for so long, was choosing to carve them into permanence. I'd be honored, Ethan said quietly. That afternoon, they began. Ethan sketched 3 bears, one large and sturdy, one slightly smaller with gentler lines, one tiny with round features. Eliza studied the drawings with fierce concentration, already planning her approach. But that night, everything changed. Clara woke to the sound of voices outside the cabin. Not normal mountain sounds. Human voices, low and urgent. She sat up in the darkness, her heart hammering. Beside the fire, Ethan was already on his feet, rifle in hand. "Stay here," he whispered. "What is it?" "Don't know, but someone's out there." Ethan moved to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. Clara heard him curse softly. "What?" she pressed. "Riders, 3 of them. They've got torches." Clara's blood ran cold. Riders at night meant trouble. Claim jumpers, outlaws, or worse. She thought of Eliza sleeping in the next room, vulnerable and unaware. A fist pounded on the door, making them both jump. "Wilder, open up! We need to talk!" Ethan's jaw tightened, but he moved to the door, keeping the rifle ready. "State your business." "It's Marshall Crawford from Timber Ridge. Got a legal matter to discuss." "Open the door, Wilder. I'm not here for trouble, but I've got papers that need serving." Marshall. Legal papers. Clara's stomach dropped. Had Mrs. Thornton changed her mind? Had someone challenged the custody arrangement? Ethan opened the door slowly, keeping himself between the marshal and the interior of the cabin. 3 men stood on the porch. The marshal, a man in a city suit holding a leather case, and someone Clara recognized as Tom Chen from town. "Marshall Crawford," Ethan said evenly. "It's late for a social call. Apologies for the hour, but this couldn't wait." The marshal's face was grim. "This here is Mr. Benjamin Hartley from St. Louis. He's come about the girl." Every muscle in Ethan's body tensed. "What about her?" The man in the suit stepped forward. "Mr. Wilder, my name is Benjamin Hartley. I'm Sarah Hartley's brother, Eliza's uncle, and I've come to take custody of my niece." The words hit like a physical blow. Clara moved to stand beside Ethan, her mind racing. "You can't. The custody was already settled. We have legal documentation." "Documentation obtained under false pretenses," Hartley said coldly. "I've reviewed the case files. You 2 married the day before taking custody, a clear arrangement of convenience designed to circumvent the spirit of the law. I've petitioned the territorial court to overturn the placement." "On what grounds?" Clara demanded. "On the grounds that Eliza belongs with blood family who can provide a proper home in civilization, not with a mountain hermit and his mail-order bride living in isolation." Hartley's voice dripped with contempt. "I have a home in St. Louis, a wife, other children. I can give Eliza stability, education, society, everything she needs." "Where were you when Sarah was dying?" Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. "Where were you when your niece needed family?" "I didn't know about Sarah's illness until after her death," Hartley said stiffly. "We'd been estranged, but I'm here now, and I'm prepared to do right by my sister's child." Clara felt the world tilting beneath her feet. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not after everything they'd built. "You can't just take her," she said desperately. "The law—" "The law is on my side," Hartley interrupted. He pulled papers from his case. "I have a writ from Judge Morrison in Denver granting temporary custody pending a full hearing. Marshall Crawford is here to enforce it." The marshal shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I don't like this any more than you do, but the writ is legal. I have to serve it." "You can fight it in court," Tom Chen spoke up for the first time. He'd come as a witness, Clara realized, to ensure the marshal followed proper procedure. "The hearing is set for 2 weeks from now. You'll have a chance to argue your case." "A hearing in Denver," Hartley said, "where the judge will see that a child belongs with established family, not strangers who married for convenience." Ethan's hands clenched on his rifle. For a terrible moment, Clara thought he might raise it, might try to physically prevent this. But then his shoulders sagged slightly, and she knew he was calculating the same terrible truth she was. You couldn't shoot a marshal serving legal papers. That would only guarantee losing Eliza forever. "She's asleep," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "You can't take her in the middle of the night. Let her sleep. Let us explain in the morning." Hartley's expression didn't soften. "The writ authorizes immediate transfer of custody. I'm within my rights to take her now." "She's 7 years old," Clara said, tears streaming down her face. "She's already lost her mother. You can't just tear her away from the only stability she has left without even letting us say goodbye properly." The marshal cleared his throat. "Mr. Hartley, the writ gives you authority, but it doesn't specify timing. We could wait until morning. Let the child wake up natural. Give her time to process this." Hartley hesitated, clearly wanting to refuse, but Tom Chen stepped forward. "I came as a witness to ensure legal procedure was followed. I'll testify that you exercised unnecessary cruelty if you take a sleeping child from her bed in the middle of the night. Judge Morrison won't look kindly on that at the hearing." The threat worked. Hartley's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Dawn, then. We leave at first light, but I'm staying here to ensure there's no attempt to flee with the child." They had until morning, a few precious hours. The men settled on the porch, Hartley refusing to accept the hospitality of the cabin, maintaining his moral superiority through rejection. Inside, Clara and Ethan stood in the main room, devastated. "What do we do?" Clara whispered. "We fight," Ethan said. "At the hearing, we fight with everything we have." "You heard him. Blood family, proper society. We can't compete with that." "We don't have to compete. We just have to prove we're what's best for Eliza." Ethan's hands were shaking. "But first we have to tell her." They stood outside Eliza's door, neither wanting to be the one to shatter the peace inside. Finally, Clara opened it gently. Eliza was awake, sitting up in bed, her eyes wide with fear. "I heard voices. Who's here?" Clara's heart broke. "Someone's come from St. Louis. Your uncle, your mother's brother." "I don't have an uncle," Eliza said, but her voice was uncertain. "You do. Benjamin Hartley. He wants to take you back to St. Louis, to live with him and his family." The color drained from Eliza's face. "No. He has legal papers," Ethan said, moving to sit on the edge of her bed. "A judge said he could take custody. We can fight it, but for now, we have to follow the law." "No," Eliza said again, more forcefully. "I don't want to go. I want to stay here, with you." Clara gathered the child into her arms. "We want you to stay too. We're going to fight for you at a hearing in 2 weeks. But until then, you have to go with your uncle." "Why?" Eliza's voice rose, panic setting in. "Why do I have to leave if I don't want to? This is my home." "Because he's blood family," Clara said, tears streaming down her face. "And the law says that matters more than what we want." Eliza pulled away, her face crumpling. "You're giving up. You're letting him take me." "We're not giving up," Ethan said desperately. "We're following the law so we can fight this properly. If we run, if we refuse to comply, we lose any chance of winning you back." "You promised," Eliza screamed, and the betrayal in her voice cut deeper than any knife. "You promised you wouldn't leave. You said we were a family." "We are," Claire said. "Then why are you letting him take me?" Eliza was sobbing now, her small body shaking with the force of it.
This story was posted on the channel West of Betrayal. Please do not repost it in any form.
There were no words that could make this better. No explanation that would ease the pain of this second abandonment. Clara held Eliza while she cried, feeling the child's heart breaking against her own. Ethan knelt beside them, his rough hands gentle on Eliza's hair. "Listen to me. This isn't forever. We will fight for you. We will come to Denver, and we will tell that judge exactly why you belong here with us. And Eliza, I promise you, I will not stop fighting until you're home." "What if you lose?" Eliza whispered. "Then I'll keep fighting anyway," Ethan said fiercely. "I'll appeal to every court, petition every judge, make such a nuisance of myself that they'll give you back just to shut me up. I didn't find you just to lose you. You're my daughter, and I will move mountains to bring you home." "We both will," Clara added. Whatever it takes. Eliza looked between them, desperately wanting to believe, but terrified to hope. You really promise? We promise, they said in unison. They stayed with her until dawn broke gray and cold over the mountains. Eliza clung to them, trying to memorize the feel of their arms around her, the sound of their voices, the safety she'd only just begun to trust. When light finally filtered through the window, Hartley knocked on the door. It's time, he called. Eliza's fingers tightened on Clara's sleeve. I don't want to go. I know, sweetheart, but you have to be brave. Just a little longer, Clara's voice broke. We'll see you in 2 weeks, at the hearing, and then we'll bring you home. They helped Eliza dress in her warmest clothes. Clara packed her small carpet bag with her belongings, making sure the wooden box with Sarah's mementos was carefully wrapped. Ethan added the carved bluebird, the symbol of hope Eliza had created. At the door, Eliza stopped. The Bear family, we didn't finish it. We'll finish it together when you come back, Ethan said. I'm not carving it without you. Hartley was waiting on the porch, his expression impatient. He looked at Eliza with an attempt at warmth that came across as stiff and forced. Hello, Eliza. I'm your Uncle Benjamin. I've come to take you home. I am home, Eliza said quietly. Hartley's face tightened. You'll understand when you're older. Come along. Eliza turned back to Clara and Ethan one last time. Don't forget me. Never, Clara whispered, not for one single second. They watched Hartley lead Eliza to the waiting horses. He lifted her onto one of the mounts, and she looked so small and lost sitting there. As the riders prepared to leave, Eliza's eyes remained locked on the cabin, on the 2 people standing in the doorway. 2 weeks, Ethan called out. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Eliza nodded, tears streaming down her face. And then they were riding away, and Clara and Ethan stood alone on the porch, watching their daughter disappear down the mountain trail. When Eliza was finally out of sight, Clara's legs gave out. She sank to the porch steps, her body racked with sobs. Ethan sat beside her, pulling her against him, and they grieved together for the child they'd fought so hard to keep. We get her back, Ethan said into Clara's hair. Whatever it takes. We get her back. Clara nodded against his chest, unable to speak. The 2 weeks that followed were the longest of their lives. They rode to Denver 3 days before the hearing, wanting time to prepare. Ethan sold timber rights to raise money for a lawyer, though the attorney they found was pessimistic. Blood family usually prevails, the lawyer said bluntly, especially when the alternative is a marriage of convenience. You need to prove not just that you can provide for her, but that separating her from you would cause demonstrable harm. It will cause harm, Clara said fiercely. She's already grieving her mother. Taking her from us is forcing her to lose another family. Can you prove that? Can you demonstrate the bond? They had no photographs, no letters, no tangible evidence of the connection they'd built. Just memories of quiet moments, of carved animals and pancake breakfasts, of nighttime vigils and tentative trust slowly earned. We can tell the truth, Ethan said, about who she is, who we are, and what we've built together. The lawyer didn't look hopeful, but he agreed to present their case. The hearing was held in a wood-paneled courtroom that smelled of old paper and floor wax. Judge Morrison presided, an elderly man with sharp eyes and a reputation for strict interpretation of the law. The room was packed with observers, word having spread about the unusual custody case. Hartley sat at one table with his lawyer, looking confident and prosperous in his city clothes. Ethan and Clara sat at the other, acutely aware of how rough and rural they appeared by comparison. And in the front row, between a stern-looking woman who must be Hartley's wife and a social worker, sat Eliza. She looked smaller than Clara remembered, pale and withdrawn in a new dress that didn't suit her. But when their eyes met across the courtroom, Eliza's face transformed. Pure longing and hope flooded her expression. The hearing began with Hartley's lawyer presenting their case. He painted a picture of civilized society, proper education, blood bonds, and family stability. He emphasized Hartley's financial resources, his established home, his other children who could provide Eliza with siblings. Then he attacked. The marriage of convenience, the isolation of mountain living. Ethan's past as a drifter who'd abandoned Sarah. Clara's history, somehow he'd discovered it, of the child who died on her watch. These are not suitable guardians, Hartley's lawyer concluded. They are strangers who entered into a legal arrangement for personal benefit, not out of genuine care for the child. Mr. Hartley offers Eliza a real family, not a convenient fiction. Their lawyer stood to present their case, but Judge Morrison held up a hand. Before we proceed, I'd like to hear from the child herself. He looked at Eliza. Young lady, can you come forward? Eliza stood on shaking legs and approached the bench. She looked tiny before the high judge's desk. You're Eliza Grace Wilder? Judge Morrison asked gently. Yes, sir. You understand what's happening here? That we're deciding where you should live? Yes, sir. I've read the reports from both parties. Your uncle says you belong with him, with blood family. Mr. and Mrs. Wilder want you to stay with them. What do you want? Eliza's voice was barely audible. I want to go home. To St. Louis? No, sir. To the mountains, with Papa and Clara. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Hartley's face darkened. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Tell me why. Eliza took a shaky breath. Because they chose me. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. My uncle didn't even know I existed until my mother died. Papa and Clara, they learned about me and they fought to keep me. They made me a room. They held me when I had nightmares. They let me cry about my mother and they didn't tell me to stop grieving. But your uncle can give you things they can't, Judge Morrison said. A fine house, other children to play with, proper schools. I don't want those things, Eliza said, and there was steel in her young voice now. I want a family who knows me, who knows that I like pancakes with cinnamon, and that I'm learning to carve, and that sometimes I wake up crying and need someone to sit with me until I can breathe again. Uncle Benjamin doesn't know any of that. He wants to take me because he thinks he should, not because he loves me. And Mr. and Mrs. Wilder love you? Eliza turned to look at them, and Clara saw everything in that gaze, fear and hope and desperate need. Yes, Eliza said simply. They do, and I love them. Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment. You may sit down. As Eliza returned to her seat, the judge turned to Ethan and Clara. I'd like to hear from you, Mrs. Wilder. You first. Clara stood, her legs weak but her voice finding strength. Your Honor, everything that's been said about us is true. We did marry for convenience. I did fail to protect a child in my care 3 years ago. Those are facts I can't deny. But what's also true is that Eliza changed everything. She wasn't supposed to matter to me. I was supposed to fulfill an obligation and collect my payment. But the moment I saw her step off that train, this tiny, grieving girl trying so hard to be brave, I was lost. Her voice broke, but she pushed forward. I've spent every day since then terrified I'll fail her the way I failed Thomas. But I show up anyway. I teach her and feed her and hold her through nightmares. Not because I have to, but because the thought of not being there for her is unbearable. She is my daughter in every way that matters, and if you take her from me, you'll be punishing both of us for bureaucratic definitions of family that have nothing to do with love. Clara sat down, trembling. Ethan stood. Your Honor, I abandoned Sarah before I knew about Eliza. That's a fact I'll carry for the rest of my life. I wasn't there for my daughter's first 7 years, and I can never get that time back. His voice was rough with emotion. But I'm here now, and I'm not the same man who ran from responsibility 7 years ago. Eliza has changed me, made me want to be better, do better. She's taught me that connection is worth the risk of pain, that love, real love, means showing up even when you're terrified you'll fail.
This story was posted on the channel west of Betrayal.
I failed at a lot
Please
of things
do not
in my life,
repost
but I will not
it in any
fail
form.
at being her father. If you send her to St. Louis, I'll follow. I'll move to the city, give up everything I have, just to be near her. Because she's not just my legal responsibility, she's my heart. And I will fight for her until I have no fight left. Judge Morrison removed his spectacles, cleaning them slowly. The courtroom was silent, everyone waiting. Mr. Hartley, the judge said finally, you've made a compelling case based on traditional family values and material advantages. But I've been a judge for 30 years, and I've learned something in that time. Blood doesn't make a family. Choice does. Commitment does. Love does. Hartley's face paled. This child has lost her mother, Judge Morrison continued. She's been through trauma that would break many adults. She's been placed with strangers who became parents through determination and courage. And then, just as she was beginning to heal, she was torn away and placed with an uncle she'd never met, in the name of propriety and blood ties. He put his spectacles back on. I've read Mrs. Thornton's reports. I've reviewed the custody arrangements. And I've listened to this child tell me, in her own words, where she belongs. The law gives me discretion in cases like these, and I'm exercising it now. He looked at Hartley. Your petition is denied. Custody remains with Ethan and Clara Wilder. The courtroom erupted. Hartley shot to his feet, protesting. His lawyer was demanding appeals, but Clara heard none of it. She was focused entirely on Eliza, who had launched herself from her seat and was running across the courtroom. Ethan caught her first, sweeping her into his arms. Clara wrapped around them both, and they stood there in the middle of the formal courtroom, holding each other and crying with relief. I'm going home, Eliza sobbed. I'm really going home. You're really going home, Ethan confirmed, his face buried in her hair. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked sharply. Order. Mr. Hartley, you have the right to appeal, but I'm telling you now, it won't succeed. This child has made her wishes clear, and they align with her best interests. The Wilders have demonstrated genuine parental commitment. Unless you can prove actual harm or neglect, no appeals court will overturn this. Hartley's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. After a moment, Hartley's shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him. He looked at Eliza one last time, and perhaps he saw what the judge had seen, a child who'd already chosen her family, and nothing he could offer would change that. I won't appeal, he said quietly. But I want it on record that I tried to do right by my sister's daughter. So noted, Judge Morrison said. He looked at Ethan and Clara. Take your daughter home. The ride back to the mountains took 2 days. They camped one night under the stars, and Eliza slept between them, her small hand holding tight to Clara's, even in sleep. As if she was afraid that if she let go, this would all prove to be a dream. When they finally crested the ridge and the cabin came into view, Eliza actually cheered. That small building, rough and isolated, was home in a way St. Louis had never been. Inside, everything was exactly as they'd left it. The bear carving sat waiting on the table, unfinished. The painted walls in Eliza's room, the carved bluebird on the mantel next to Sarah's wooden box. That first night home, they made pancakes for dinner, a celebration meal. Eliza stood on her stool helping Clara, talking nonstop about everything that had happened, processing her fear and relief through constant chatter. Uncle Benjamin's house was huge, but it was cold. Not temperature cold, but feeling cold. Like nobody really lived there. They just existed. And his wife kept telling me to be quiet, that children should be seen and not heard. And I wanted to tell her that Mama always said my voice mattered, but I was scared she'd get angry. You don't have to be scared here, Ethan said. Your voice always matters here. After dinner, they returned to the bear carvings. Eliza picked up her piece and studied it thoughtfully. I want to change it, she said. Change what? Ethan asked. I was making 3 bears, Papa, Mama, Baby, but that's not complete. She looked at Clara. I want to make 4, a mama bear, a papa bear, and 2 cubs, because Clara isn't replacing my mother. She's something different, something new, and I don't have to choose between them. Clara's eyes filled with tears. 4 bears sound perfect. They worked together in comfortable silence, the scratch of knife on wood, the occasional comment or instruction. Outside, winter was settling in properly now. Soon snow would come, and they'd be isolated for months. But the cabin was warm, the fire bright, and they had each other. As Eliza concentrated on her carving, Clara watched her. This child who'd arrived broken and grieving had somehow found the courage to heal. Not completely. Grief didn't work that way. Sarah's loss would always be part of Eliza's story, but alongside the grief, hope had taken root. Later, after Eliza was in bed, Clara and Ethan sat by the fire. For the first time since the marriage, Ethan reached out and took Clara's hand. Thank you, he said. For what? For saying yes that day in the store, for being brave enough to try, for loving her. Clara looked at their joined hands. Somewhere along the way, this arrangement had become real. This convenient marriage had transformed into something that mattered. I love you too, she said quietly. I didn't expect to, but I do. Ethan's hand tightened on hers. I know we started this as a legal arrangement. We're not an arrangement anymore, Clara interrupted. We haven't been for a while. We're a family, a real one. A family, Ethan repeated, testing the word. Then he smiled, a real smile, unguarded and full of wonder. We're a family. That night, Clara didn't sleep in the separate bedroom. She slept beside Ethan in front of the fire, their hands still linked, knowing that tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but no longer facing them alone. 3 months later, deep in the heart of winter, Eliza finished the 4 bear carvings. They were imperfect, the work of a child's hands with rough edges and asymmetrical features, but they were beautiful precisely because of those imperfections. She lined them up on the mantel beside the bluebird and Sarah's wooden box. A mama bear with gentle eyes. A papa bear, strong and protective. And 2 cubs, one slightly larger, one smaller, standing close together. The bigger cub is me now, Eliza explained. The smaller one is me before, when Mama was alive. Because both of those versions of me matter. I'm not erasing who I was. I'm adding to it. Clara pulled her close. Your mother would be so proud of you. I think so too, Eliza said. And then, with the simple directness of childhood, she added, I think she'd be glad I have you and Papa, that I'm not alone. That night, as snow fell soft and thick beyond the windows, the 3 of them sat together around the fire. Ethan read aloud from one of the books while Clara mended clothes and Eliza worked on a new carving project. A whole forest of animals, she'd decided, to keep the bear family company. They were so focused on their individual tasks that they almost missed the moment when Eliza, without looking up from her carving, said casually, Mama Clara, can you pass me the small knife? Clara's hands froze mid-stitch. Mama Clara. Not just Clara. Mama. Ethan stopped reading, and for a moment the only sound was the crackle of the fire. Eliza looked up, suddenly uncertain. Is that okay? I don't want to forget my first mama, but you're my mama too now. Can I have 2? Clara couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. You can have 2, Ethan said gently. Love doesn't divide. It multiplies. Your first mama will always be part of you, and Clara is part of you now too. Eliza nodded, satisfied with this answer, and returned to her carving as if she hadn't just healed something fundamental in all 3 of them. Clara met Ethan's eyes across the firelight, and what passed between them needed no words. They had come so far from that desperate day in the general store, from strangers making an impossible bargain to a family bound by choice and love, and the daily decision to keep showing up for each other. Outside, the mountain winter raged with indifferent fury. But inside this small cabin, 3 people who'd been broken had found a way to make each other whole, not through perfection or the erasure of past pain, but through honesty, courage, and the simple, powerful act of staying. Years later, when Eliza was grown with children of her own, she would return to that cabin with her family. She'd show her children the carved animals on the mantel, the bluebird representing hope, the 4 bears representing the family that chose each other. She'd tell them about her mother Sarah, who taught her that love makes everything beautiful, and she'd tell them about Clara and Ethan, who taught her that family isn't just who you're born to, but who chooses to stay. But on this winter night, she was still 7 years old, sitting by a fire with her papa and her mama, carving a forest of wooden animals and learning that home isn't a place. It's the people who fight for you, hold you through nightmares, and love you even when you're too scared to love them back. The mountains stood eternal and indifferent outside their windows. But inside, in the warmth
this
of
story
firelight
was posted
and
on the channel west
3
of
broken
Betrayal.
souls had found
Please
their
do
way
not
to something
repost
that looked
it in any
remarkably
form.
like happiness. Not because everything was perfect or pain-free, but because they'd learned the secret that transforms survival into living. That showing up matters more than being qualified. That love is a choice you make every day, and that the bravest thing you can do is let someone else see your scars and trust them to stay anyway. They were a family forged from desperate circumstances and impossible choices. They were imperfect and still learning, but they were real, and they were together, and in the end, that was everything that mattered. The fire burned low, the snow continued to fall, and in a cabin high in the mountains, far from the judgment of society and the complications of the world below, a father, a mother, and a daughter found peace in the simplest and most profound truth of all. They had chosen each other, and they would keep choosing each other, no matter what storms came. Together, they were home.